This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Top of the market to you. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning, everyone. We'll get to Nvidia in a moment. Robin Wigglesworth over at the FT. Gross. Bill Gross.
Wow. Okay.
He's selling the rest of the stamp collection.
Is he?
Top of the market.
Yep, I'm with
It's
you.
like gold. It's like copper. It's like wheat to the moon.
I've got a coin collection.
Do you have a coin collection? I used to have a coin collection.
I
My
got
mother
nickels,
got rid
pennies.
of it.
Yeah,
Very
I got
cool.
those, yep.
Do you have the 1909 SVDB?
I do not, but you know what I just found like a week ago in change from Ray's in Seagirt, New Jersey, a 1927 penny. Phenomenal condition.
Outstanding.
So I replaced my 1927 penny I had in there. So
Lisa's going, you can never predict this show. She'll put that out on YouTube live chat here.
Yeah.
And good morning, everyone. We are happy because tech is wonderful. The market's
Yes.
up. Futures up 32. I'm going to give you my theme right now on Nvidia, and we'll talk. We have Sebastian Page with us, world class, here to talk about this. Paul, this is like the new adult tech. You and I have been doing this for years. I went to their website. I read the financials. I read the CFO statement in that.
Yep.
This is like the anti-ego of the past. I was blown away by the adultness of this growth juggernaut trying to be a responsible corporate citizen. I didn't expect that.
Listen to this, Tom. Their fiscal 2021, which ends in January 21, $17 billion in revenue. In fiscal 25, January 25, $115 billion.
It's a growth juggernaut.
Unbelievable.
And we got Gene Munster coming up.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you Gene's insight. He'll tell it to you, but he's got the insight of the day on Nvidia. We'll have Mr. Munster with us later on. Let's get to it. We got to get to Sebastian Page here. Futures up at 31. We're on Apple CarPlay, Android as well. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Search Bloomberg Podcast. Look for Lisa Mateo. She'll be out there on live chat with our Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios, Lisa Mateo.
Yes, good morning. Futures definitely advancing after upbeat earnings from Nvidia. Kind of reinforce that global AI boom is going strong. The company announced a 10-for-1 stock split. On top of it, shares up more than 6% right now. Now, as far as futures, we'll start with NASDAQ futures up nearly 1% right now. We're 185 points. Dow futures up about 0.1% or 52 points, and S&P futures up 0.6% or 32 points. Now, Nvidia's blowout earnings also sending a bunch of hardware stocks rallying. Let's start with server makers like Super Microcomputer up more than 4%. Dell Technologies up more than 5%. And then you have the chip makers too. You have Broadcom up 2% and Advanced Micro Devices up 2%. Now, from earnings to interest rates, Federal Reserve minutes, they showed officials, well, they remain in no rush to make some cuts. And on the economic calendar for today, initial jobless claims for last week. We'll also get a read on manufacturing and new home sales. As far as the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.86%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year at 4.42%, and that is little change. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Let me set the template here. Long ago and far away, the sell side did research, and the buy side sat around on a 4-hour workday and a 2-hour lunch and decided what to buy and hold. And a company in Baltimore said, we're not going to do that. And Capital Guardian Trust out in LA was doing this too, but a company in Baltimore said, we're going to do our own study. And they led with tech. Roger McNamee and all at T. Rowe Price was ginormous in tech analysis. Joining us from T. Rowe Price with all of the heritage there of we do our own research, Sebastian Page with this global multi-asset. I'm so happy you're here. The arrogance of these tech children over 20, 30, 40 years. I used to go out to SEPR at Stanford, and this is before the white-soled shoes.
Yep.
And some of them were obnoxious. I don't sense that in Nvidia, Sebastian Page. It's like they're acting like an adult company.
I agree. I don't think this is any way comparable to the tech bubble. In fact, Nvidia's price earning is down.
Yeah, I know.
Paul, you talked about how much sales they've created. They've created about $45 billion in net profits in about 2 years. Yeah. So there's fundamentals behind this AI rally. And Tom, I will say the buy side works at least as hard as the sell side. And my colleague who
Yeah, but
runs...
Sweeney could say, well, that gets you after a 32-hour work week. Continue.
It's all about the benchmark, I suppose. Yeah. But, you know, Tom, my colleague Dom Rizzo, he runs a global tech fund. I'm an asset allocator.
Yeah.
I've never been so interested in stocks because they're just so big and they drive asset returns.
You know, Paul, pick it up here, but a 10-to-1 stock split, a responsible dividend increase, and they're just talking about husbanding out what you do for return to shareholders instead of going, we're growthy,
right,
and we're going to buy the San Francisco Giants. I don't get that.
Sebastian, I mean, when you think about, I mean, you're at T. Rowe, huge firm down in one of my favorite towns, Charm City, Baltimore. How do you guys think about allocating capital here? Because unlike 2022, you can make some money here in the equity markets. You can make some money. You can get some yield in the credit markets. How do you think about allocating capital here?
Yeah, and I was going to say, my colleague Dom Rizzo talked about AI, and he likes grand statements, and there are lots of grand statements around AI, but his take is it is going to be the greatest productivity boost for humanity since electricity.
Wow.
That's a grand statement. I don't know how on board I am with this, but as an asset allocator, the bottom line is that we still like growth stocks, but there's a lot of optimism priced in growth stocks, and we have a small overweight to value stocks at the moment. And then if I look over the shoulder of people selecting stocks in the portfolios we allocate to, if I look at what the stock pickers are doing, it's interesting because within value, they're long the less growthy, the less traditional value parts of value. So they long non-bank financials. They like some tech stocks within value, which is interesting. And they also like healthcare a lot, healthcare services, healthcare insurance. So we're long value. Our stock pickers are tilting the portfolio in a way that's really appealing right now. I think there's room for the market to broaden.
So,
and,
I mean, is it when you look at value stocks, how do you think about value? Like, what's value to you guys? Is it a single-digit PE? How do you think about, is it relative value to the market? How do you think about value?
So, Paul, I love that question because I've been researching the definition of value. We've had the mother of all values traps looking at value stocks relative to growth stocks.
It's like 10 years.
It's 20. If you plot the price to book relative between value stocks and growth stocks, it's basically down for 20 years. So, Paul, it's a great question. Is it book to price? Is it price earnings? Is it price to cash flow? It's actually more than all of that because accounting standards have not adjusted to intangible investments, and they've not adjusted to technology disruption. So you actually need to look through those ratios.
Sebastian Page with us, and I can't say enough about his adult and pro book, accessible for mere mortals out there, Beyond Diversification. Beyond Diversification starts with marketing strategies. There's a financial uproar now about marketing strategies and the failure of the American retirement system. What's the worst marketing strategy of diversification with our retirement assets?
Look, I think that right now it's a good time to be boring, Tom. It's a good time to think about your risk tolerance. We talk a lot about diversification in terms of the 60-40. Is the 60-40 dead?
Can I stand going down 18%? Can I stand going down 35%?
Right. But if you look at life cycle and, to your question, retirement savings, that's actually a really thorny problem to solve. Bill Sharp said, this is the thorniest, hardest problem to solve in all of finance. And what you find is that 60-40, it really depends on your risk tolerance. Forget that. I'm 15 years from retirement. I have a much higher allocation to stocks.
Paul thinks I'm 15 minutes from retirement, but we won't go there.
I did not want to go there, Tom. But my point is you need to think about risk tolerance, and then you diversify accordingly. And yes, right now, if I look out 12 months, I do think there's room to be boring, to be diversified.
Got to get this in, too important. Charles Ellis, iconic in the FT yesterday. Most of us have too much in bonds. Do you agree?
Yes. I think let's go back to the 60-40. If you have 40% in bonds, I think you can move to absolute return strategies. You can move to hedged equity strategies. You can indeed move to alternatives. That often turns into a pitch for alternatives. But I do think that we have higher inflation volatility, higher rate volatility, and you can get a bit more juice out of that 40 going forward.
Sebastian Page, thank you so much. With T. Rowe Price this morning. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. Former Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley says this November she'll be voting for her former boss and opponent, Donald Trump. The one-time UN ambassador under former President Trump built a campaign around wooing independents, moderates, and anti-Trump Republicans. Haley criticized President Biden's handling of Israel, Ukraine, the border, the economy, and more, saying that's why she's backing Trump.
Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump.
Nikki Haley spoke before the conservative think tank, the Hudson Institute. The UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak shocked the country by announcing the next election will take place in just 6 weeks, months ahead of what was expected.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
The last time there was a rare snap summer election in the UK was 1945. Passengers on board the Singapore Airlines flight that encountered severe turbulence in the skies over Asia suffered traumatic harm ranging from spinal cord to skull and brain injuries. A Thai hospital has revealed medics are still treating a wide range of injuries, including some severe ones, but none are life-threatening. One British man was killed and dozens of others seriously hurt after the flight from London to Singapore suddenly lost altitude on Tuesday as it entered neighboring airspace. People were injured as bodies were catapulted into the cabin roof and personal belongings were hurled around the aircraft. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
It is story time here at Bloomberg Surveillance, and we're going to do it with all of us here. Mine is 20 rows back. I was flying fancy, and I'm looking back 20 or 30 rows in turbulence, and there's a woman on the roof of the airplane who broke her arm. I mean, it was nothing compared to this tragedy with Singapore Air. Paul, what turbulence have you seen?
My very first business trips back in the 80s down to Miami, they told us, hey, it's going to be turbulent coming into Miami, so buckle up. And I thought we all did. I certainly did. But a few people apparently did not. And they went flying into the roof, to the top of the plane and crashing down, blood everywhere. So it's just that I learned very early on, just keep it buckled.
Lisa, what'd you see?
Wow, I haven't had anything like
You
that.
anything like this?
I've been lucky, but I mean, the only thing is just if you like rumbles like this, when your kids kind of get nervous next to you, you have to settle them down.
Michael Barr, you go down a country road in Pennsylvania and you had turbulence and ended up on top of the Bronco.
One time that I did have turbulence, and it was an eerie feeling, and I was buckled up, but I left the seat, and I will never forget that feeling. And then you're looking at the wings flapping out there, and I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah, all I can say, folks, it's real. Listen to Paul Sweeney. I think of the four of us, he's had the most difficulty. This stuff is really, really serious. Tell your kids, because mine are lazy, just like everybody else, wear your seatbelt, even if it's loosely, during the airplanes. That's your safety note for the day from Bloomberg Surveillance. Futures up 32. We'll get a lot more on Nvidia. Gene Munster later in the program. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, June 4th to 6th in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit insight.bnymellon.com. All right, futures seeing a nice lift as Nvidia clears away for AI stocks to keep powering higher. Nvidia shares right now up 7%. As far as futures, we have NASDAQ futures up 1% or 188 points. Dow futures little changed, up 35, and we have S&P futures up 0.5%, up 31 points. Europe's stock 600 also pulled higher by a jump in the tech sector. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.86%. That's little change, and the 10-year yield at 4.42%, and that is little changed. Few companies making news this morning. JP Morgan Chase, sources saying it's on the hunt to buy a private credit firm to boost its $3.6 trillion asset management arm. And shares of DuPont, they're up 5%. It said it plans to split into 3 publicly traded companies. And finally, Live Nation shares down 6%. Sources saying the Department of Justice looking to break up the company over its control of concert ticket sales. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
We go to our Live Nation correspondent now, Paul Sweeney.
We did that deal back in the day. We put that company together. It's phenomenal. I mean, you have the biggest concert promoter in the world, the biggest owner of venues in the world, and you put it together with the biggest ticketing agency in the world. We're shocked at the regulation.
I'm just shocked, exactly.
Shocked at the regulation.
I could go all day on this, folks. I won't. Good morning. I got to say good morning. Mohamed El-Arian and Stephanie Ruhle, they're in Paris with Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
Which is just great. I wish they'd taken afterthought with them.
And you know who's Live Nation? It's Dr. John Malone.
Yeah.
That whole thing together.
Yeah. Well, Sweeney could go all day on this because he can't get the tickets for Bruce that he wants to get. We'll continue. Our future's up at 30. Are you done, Lisa?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. We're looking for the newspapers. I can't wait to get there today. Right now, and this is such a pleasure to have him in the studio, Holger Schmieding is with us, chief economist at Berenberg Bank. And, of course, this is on the Eurozone and the outlook, and Holger knows we rip up the script. Holger's on a plane yesterday coming in on a Gulfstream, and they announced an election in Europe. Are you in London? Paul and I are trying to go over July 4. What perfect timing. Do you know they lost, the colonies won on July 4, Holger? Steve Ratner had a great chart out yesterday that had the trend line for the extrapolation of prior British growth. And basically, they flatlined over X number of years off of Brexit, this and that. How far behind, Holger Schmieding, is the United Kingdom in growth?
The UK is significantly behind the Eurozone ever since we had this Brexit referendum in 2016.
You go right to Brexit.
It is right Brexit. If you look at the charts, there is a clear break in British business investment right when the Brexit referendum happened in June 2016. Until then, the UK, the post-Thatcher UK, the somewhat reformed UK, was one of the strongest economies in Europe in terms of growth. And now it has fallen back to below the Eurozone, which includes laggard Italy, we have to say. So the UK really has taken a significant beating.
Right.
But actually, to his credit, Rishi Sunak helped to clean up at least a bit of the mess. He struck a deal with the EU over Northern Irish border controls. He removed the risk of a trade war. And ever since, British business investment has started to recover from a low level because companies now at least know what the costs are of trading with the EU.
Your general counsel at Berenberg Bank is going to hate me for this. I don't care. We're making this. Mickey Levy will straighten it out. Holger Schmieding, it's just as simple as this. Is Labour like Blair? Is Labour like Brown, or is this a new Labour Party that's an unknown for the British people?
It is probably close to Brown, yes. It is mostly something like the new Labour of Blair and Brown. Of course, there are always concerns here and there, times change, but Keir Starmer seems to have learned the lesson. Don't be like left loony Jeremy Corbyn. If you want to win an election, and if you want to win elections twice, you have to be in the middle in Europe.
I mean, Paul, this is great. I mean, it's like, and what's so amazing about this, Holger, Paul, me, Lisa, all of our knowledge of the British elections is affected by Netflix's The Crown.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like the history books don't matter. We saw this on Netflix. It must be true, Paul.
All right, so Holger, you're over here in New York. I'm sure you probably took a late plane to get over here. What do you think of this U.S. economy here?
The U.S. economy is doing still surprisingly well, despite a bit of weakness in the latest data. We have in the U.S. a clear case of two things. First of all, there is genuine dynamism. This is artificial intelligence. This is technology, yes. And secondly, there is fiscal support for the economy on a scale that no other economy in the world would get away with, because the U.S. has the privilege of having the global reserve currency, of being the safe haven for money in geopolitical uncertain times. And weirdly, actually, the political uncertainty, including the geopolitical uncertainty that might stem from the US election, to put it mildly, is actually something that sends dollars into the safe haven, propping up the US, rather than sending money out of the US.
All right, so I know you split your time between London and Berlin. Talk to us about the German economy. I mean, when I think of the German economy, I think of just industrial might. You know, the Midwest of the United States. I think Germany and their industrial might, turbines, Siemens, all that kind of stuff. Talk to us about the German economy. It's not in great shape, is it?
Well, the German economy is not in great shape, but it's not the sick man of Europe again either. Germany has, to its credit, a very strong labor market, still one of the strongest in Europe. It has the best fiscal position of any significant economy in the world, you could say. That is, it could afford to do something about its problems. It unfortunately denies itself a bit of the fiscal stimulus, say a bit of the business tax cuts, which it would need. But the German economy also is not quite as weak as many people think, because Germany is highly cyclical. It's manufacturing. It has self-imposed problems, but manufacturing globally is perking up a little, and as a result, as we saw today in the PMIs, the German economy will come back to some extent, to a lesser extent than Southern Europe, but the German economy will also come back.
With all the turmoil, including a war, the shock of Sweden and Finland in NATO, is there a tinge, I gotta be careful here, I'm gonna insult a lot of people over in Europe. Good morning on YouTube. Is there a tinge of more Anglo-Saxon capitalism across the continent?
Probably not. We're not going that much in that
Jen-Hsun
direction.
said the same thing to me. I mean, he said exactly what you said.
We are, of course, trying to support our economy. Unfortunately, we are not doing enough of the deregulation. Unfortunately, you are a bit more in the camp. We want to be careful about applying new technologies rather than be at the forefront, including the forefront of risks from new technologies. Having said that, once again, some of the US advantage over Europe is simply a reflection that the US is spending money it doesn't earn itself. Is having the twin deficits. Whereas Europe...
See, at least they just took a shot at us.
Europe is not heading for any significant fiscal reckoning, unlike the US in some years.
It's end of May. I got to ask this question, and Katie Greifeld wants me to ask everybody from Europe this question. The Olympics, would you swim in the River Seine?
I probably would. Yes.
You would? Really?
Without knowing sort of all the latest tests, rivers in Europe generally are significantly cleaner than they were, say, 10, 20 years ago.
Would you like to expand it to say they're significantly cleaner than in the United States?
I haven't tested that recently, so I don't have a comment. I'm not sure I'll be in the Hudson this evening.
But the rivers are better off there.
Much of the environment in Europe is much better off than it used to be, say, 20 years ago. Europe is going greener. It's in the forefront of going greener in the globe, which does impose costs on us, because we partly do it the expensive way. With emission certificates you have to pay for, rather than doing it the US way, which is giving subsidies that taxpayers in the future may eventually half regret. But Europe is going cleaner.
This has been fabulous. Well timed. Holger Schmieding, thank you so much. A joy to have you in the studio. With Berenberg Bank, we did everything but talk about his research note.
Yes, exactly.
I really enjoyed that. Just perfect timing with Dr. Schmieding's perspective here on this British election. Look to London, to Lizzie Burden and all. Marcus Ashworth, our full coverage of the dash to the British election. How come our elections can't be this short?
I know, exactly.
Please.
We're nowhere near our election.
Exactly. Lisa, work on that. From New York City, futures lift up 32. Good morning, Nvidia. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures seeing a nice lift. Nvidia has a lot to do with it. For a fifth quarter in a row, the chipmaker came through with an earnings beat, a forecast for further growth, and a 10-for-1 stock split. All that in one. Right now, shares, they are higher this morning. As far as the futures, we have NASDAQ futures up more than 1%, 195 points. We have Dow futures up about 0.1%, 42 points. S&P futures up 0.6%, 33 points. Over to the bond market, the two-year yield 4.86%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that is little change. To commodity, gold extending its declines down. Spot gold at $2,368 an ounce. And over to oil, we have Brent crude $82.45 a barrel. WTI crude $78.12 a barrel. To earnings we go. Yesterday was a lot about Target. Today we have more retail earnings coming in. VF Corp, you know them. They own Vans, Dickies, Timberland brands. They're down 13%, reported a loss in a 7th consecutive quarter of falling sales. We go to BJ's Wholesale. They reported adjusted earnings per share. The first quarter beat estimate, but shares are down about 1% right now. And finally, Ralph Lauren beat estimates. Their shares down 1%. We're still waiting for Dollar Tree and Ross Stores. We'll keep you posted. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Really appreciate, Lisa, the earnings. Paul, I don't know if you keep up with it, but I can't keep up with all the earnings.
No.
I mean, Lisa's saving me every morning.
Exactly, every day.
It's fascinating. This is important. Got Gene Munster coming up later. We're going to get to that right now. I'm not going to wait. It's 7:31. Some of you got a busy day ahead. Mandeep Singh walked in the door. How cool is Mandeep Singh? On his LinkedIn page, you got to click another button for his job experiences. Yep. You don't have to do that for a loser like me.
No, it's just
but
right
Mandeep's
there.
done so much. I mean, he's at SAP years ago and blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's Munster's theory. The actual purchasing and acquisition of this stuff, Nvidia plays hardball in a collegial way, and they say, we're not going to give you the new Blackwell or Blacksmith chip or whatever unless you consume your orders forward of the present chip. Munster's real big on this, and that there's none of this revenue shortfall stuff, because they're going to be on the phone with Microsoft or whoever and say, you're not getting the new toy unless you complete your orders for the old toy. Do you buy it?
I think so. There is an element of that, and it's reflected in their ASPs and gross margin. I mean,
average selling price.
Average selling price.
Nice,
and every chip they come out with, whether it's Hopper, Blackwell, it's at a higher price point. The reason being they're packaging more stuff. So not only does it have the GPU, it also has the networking. And now they're adding the power cooling gear to that system. So
to cool the chips.
To cool the chips.
Like they cool the Formula One racers with the DeWalt, you know.
So the average GPU price was around $25,000 to $30,000. This thing could be north of $2 million. One system that you're buying that has got a cluster.
The bottom line with all the happy talk and guys in leather coats and shoes with white soles is there's a hardball guy in purchasing saying, hey, Amazon, you're not getting the new toy unless you buy all of the old toys that you're slotted in for, right?
Right now, yes. And because the market is so supply constrained, all these large hyperscalers have no choice but to do that. And yesterday, actually, Jen-Hsun called out Tesla joining that club of hyperscalers buying, $7 to $10 billion of Nvidia chips and systems. So clearly, the list of hyperscalers is expanding. You have Tesla, there is one large healthcare company, and Sovereign. Sovereign is they called out France, Italy, trying to build governments, yes.
Wow. Carol Masters a hyperscaler.
I know she is, exactly. Okay. Why isn't there more competition here? Why can't Intel or AMD or any of these other knuckleheads out there that our good friend Anand Srinivasan covered for me for many years, why don't these chip companies do what NVIDIA's doing? I mean, it can't be that tough.
Actually, it is tough. So what we are finding is NVIDIA has a fixed cost base. They have the IP to really scale this and keep launching, new versions of their chip every 6 months. They're executing it to a point where, by the time AMD comes out with MI300 or the next version of that, they're already 5 times in terms of performance. Wow. So it's all about performance and where NVIDIA is relative to others. And right now, they have shortened the 2-year architecture cycle to 1 year. So, I mean, look at what Intel did over the last 25 years. Every 2 years with Moore's Law, they used to have a new architecture. Yeah. What NVIDIA is doing is every 1 year, they're coming up with a new architecture with 4 to 5x performance. So they're actually beating Moore's Law.
I'm looking for a reason to short this thing, and my short would be competition. But you're telling me that it's not there,
competition
right?
is not the short thesis. I think it's a law of large numbers and expectations getting ahead.
Why are stocks up this morning? Why is the NASDAQ up? What was the pixie dust in that call that allows someone to extrapolate out greater belief in Microsoft?
That AI is a 10 to 15-year cycle. Yes, you will have slowdowns. I mean, right now it's in that acceleration phase. There could be slowdowns, but we are in a multi-year cycle when it comes to
I'm just trying to get to the Apple meeting in June. I got a back order the Hermes black shoes with a white sole so I can be like Ed Ludlow.
Exactly.
Can you see me in those?
Exactly.
The police have been giving me tickets on Lexington Avenue. Mandy, it's just simple as this. We got to get to the Apple meeting. You need to convince me I need AI on my next iPhone. Why do I need AI on my next iPhone? I don't get it.
Well, right now, you are consuming all the AI on the cloud. So you go to an app, that app actually is using a summary feature or an image generation feature that's on the cloud. The hope is because all this is driven by data, you want to do these things on your PC. Microsoft launched an AI PC so that you don't have to go to cloud for these AI features. Similarly with smartphone, Apple has to do this at the chip and the OS level so that you don't have to go to the cloud for all the stuff that goes on your phone. And so that's the on-device AI aspect. In fact, I was looking for hints around Apple being a buyer like Tesla for all the Nvidia systems, because at the end of the day, Apple kind of has a cloud component to their whole system as well. And so you want to see that.
Steve Eisman was very articulate about this yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mandeep, if I'm a buyer of a Nvidia chip or chip design, if I'm Amazon, so I buy it, do I have to replace it, upgrade it every year, every couple of years, or do I just kind of, like my iPhone, I've had my iPhone for 5 years. I mean, what's the replacement cycle like? I'm kind of wondering when the Nvidia sales acceleration story plays out, or does it?
So it goes back to what Tom was saying. They are holding everyone hostage to buy every version of their chip. And right now, you know, if you're a large company that's spending $35–40 billion like the hyperscalers are in CapEx, you have to account for that in your depreciation costs next year and the year forward. And the depreciation cycle for all these servers are 4 to 5 years. Guess what? With Nvidia, now they are shortening it to 1 to 2 years, so your depreciation expense will go up. All right. But obviously, it's not reflected yet.
Tell me about this guy, Jen-Hsun Huang. He is the CEO. Tell me about this person, because we know Tim Cook, we know Satya Nadella, we know all those guys. Tell us about this guy, because this guy is crazy wealthy with this stock here, and you're telling me he's kind of the center of all technology these days.
Yeah,
tell us about him.
He is the guy who has made semi companies look cool again. I mean, semi companies used to trade at 2 to 3 times EV to sales. Now we have a company that's trading at 20 times EV to sales and actually having gross margins of 80%. These were unheard of.
John emails in from London, and he says, if Nvidia does a 10-for-1 split, is it big enough, stable enough to be a Dow Jones stock? It's still an upstart small cap, or is it like Anaconda Copper?
Well, so clearly, I think with the stock split, there will be more retail participation with the stock price going lower, and obviously there is a lot more shares to buy. But in the end, it doesn't matter in terms of market cap. The market cap stays the same. It's just the stock is more accessible to all kinds of investors here.
So, Tom, just for that, Jen-Hsun Huang, the founder, president, CEO of Nvidia, he is on the Rich Go top list of wealthy folks in the world. He's number 20. He's got a net worth of $83.6 billion. And year to date, Tom, that's up $39.6 billion. He's had a good year.
He's had a good year, but there was a real sea change. This is great. Mandeep Singh, thank you so much for perspective here, and really looking forward to talking to Gene Munster later as well. Futures over the last 90 minutes have lifted. NASDAQ futures up 200, up 1.1%. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Nikki Haley says she will be voting for Donald Trump in the general election. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Haley, who challenged Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, is the latest critic of the former president to back his White House bid, as she told a gathering at the Hudson Institute in Washington.
Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump.
Haley's endorsement of Trump is the latest sign of his near total grip over the Republican Party. President Biden has openly courted Haley's supporters to back his campaign. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
It's been nearly 2 years since the massacre at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, left 19 school children and 2 teachers dead. Yesterday, a settlement was reached with the city of Uvalde and the families. Families will receive $2 million from the city's insurance coverage. Josh Koshkoff, an attorney representing the families, also says Uvalde officials have agreed to honor the victims of the shooting.
Establishing May 24th as an annual day of remembrance. Building a memorial and funding a memorial on the plaza and coordinating with the families. Continuing to support and further supporting mental health services for the families and the survivors in the greater Uvalde community.
The settlement also includes demands to repair and rebuild the Uvalde Police Department. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a general election for July 4th. Sunak's decision to stake the Conservative Party's future on a rare summer snap election was so secret that even his Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, appeared surprised by the plan. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And now time for our, forget about the Knicks, our obligatory Rangers update. And, our expert Paul on the Rangers really said the one team they don't want to play is the Florida Panthers, who I know next to nothing about. Hey, 3-0 Rangers. Yeah. And I guess the Rangers were offense-free, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, not a good way to start this series here, though. I mean, the two really competitive teams, from what I understand here, and to me, it ended up in these playoffs, whether it's the NBA or the NHL, they're both. I mean, when you get to the playoffs, they're all good teams, all great players, they're all clutch. It's just energy. Who comes out with more energy on a night-to-night basis? And it's almost like home court, home ice. It doesn't really matter that much. It's just who, for whatever reason, comes out with more energy. Seems to get
right now out with more energy of people negotiating the NBA contract. This is like a big deal. I mean, it's heating up now. I mean, it's like really day to day. What does TNT and Warner Brothers do, and NBC and all the rest of them?
Yeah, exactly. So again, Warner Brothers Discovery through their TNT has been a partner for the NBA forever, and inside the NBA has been a staple of the NBA viewing experience, and now you've got the NBC looking to get back into the NBA, and what does that mean for Warner Brothers Discovery? It's just all good for the NBA, I can tell you that.
Does NBC want to do this for NBC or for their streaming platforms?
I think everything, Tom. I think they want to do it across all their platforms, and I think that's where we are these days with these media companies. It's just across all platforms, and they just got to figure out, can I make money when I do it across all of these platforms?
I tried to find a show last night, and streaming, it's such a pain.
Well, good luck trying to find the Yankees tonight. It's going to be on, our will know, but I think it's going to be on Prime or something. So
yeah,
half the Yankee Nation will be fumbling around.
It's just busted. Tonight. You used to go in, your mother would be sitting there watching Gunsmoke. Go to bed. You have school tomorrow. Yeah. There was like Gunsmoke.
With a cocktail and a cigarette.
There was CBS and NBC and that upstart station ABC. Who were they? They had Frank McGee. And, it's like, what are you laughing about, Barr? You're the only one here that remembers Gunsmoke. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are on the rise after Nvidia put to rest any worries about a slowdown in AI spending. Nvidia shares right now, they're up about 7%. As far as futures, we have NASDAQ futures up 1%, nearly 200 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, up 64 points. And S&P futures up 0.6%, up 34 points. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.87%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that is little change. A few companies making news. We have Warner Brothers Discovery. They're picking up some of the college football playoff games. It's a deal with Walt Disney's ESPN network. Financial terms were not disclosed about that. We have Warner Brothers Discovery up about 1%, Walt Disney up about 0.1%. Mondelez, they've been fined $366 million by the European Union for curbing cross-border sales of its chocolate, cookies, its coffee. Those ADRs down about 0.5%. And finally, Amazon drivers, they could be coming to your home to collect returns. The information reporting it's launched a pilot program, several warehouses. It could be your next savior. Amazon shares up nearly 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
It just never ends. What do we do? Where are all the boxes in 5 years?
Oh my!
I mean, in the walk up I live in, every day at the bottom of the building. I mean, it's just more and more boxes.
I spend half my time breaking down the boxes. That's fun to do. That's my job. I break it down, then I take it to recycling.
It's my husband's job.
Exactly. So I can hang with him.
There you go.
I can hang with him.
You know, YouTube live chat today. Lisa Mateo out on live chat. Look for her in a moment. Some guy's doing an AI search of my college hockey career. Really? And this is the problem. Okay, Stephen, thank you for this. Somebody out on AI, whatever, says, I donned the blades for Harvard. No, this couldn't be, this is not true. I remember my grandfather was class of 26, and there was like this affinity to go. And one, Mr. Cleary told me I wasn't going to play for Harvard. And two, I knew I wasn't going to play. They were really quite good back then. But, you know, this is the kind of stuff. There's fictions out there.
AI thing, it's out there.
Like you know, it's serious stuff.
It's serious stuff, but I'm not sure I can go up to somebody at a cocktail party and talk about AI. I don't have that knowledge of AI.
Yeah. I remember.
If you don't have cocktail party knowledge of something, you can't talk about it.
I remember as a kid, when your dreams are shattered, I knew exactly where I was when I figured out I wouldn't play in the NHL. I knew I was like 15 or 16, and I just figured it out.
Yep.
That just possibly
Crushing.
that wasn't going to happen. We say good morning to all of you here with a big lift in the market. Paul, what do we do with the market? 202 points, NASDAQ 100. It keeps going up to new highs.
I know we got the NASDAQ up over 1% here today. Nice move.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front page is brought to you by Lisa Mateo out on YouTube, and also brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers, they charge dollar margin loan rates from 5.83% to 6.83% rates, subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. Let me say that again. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. Did we do newspapers yesterday?
No, we did not.
We did not.
Oh, God.
So she is stoked with 2 days of newspapers. What do you got?
All right. This was actually, too, on episode of The Deal. They had Redbird Capital's Jerry Cardinal. Well, the Wall Street Journal has an article because they had an interview with him, too. This is as colleges are facing this reality, right? They have to share revenue with the athletes. They have to start paying them. Private equity starting to move in to help them adapt to this. So this is a new business. It's led by Redbird Capital's Jerry Cardinal. It's called Collegiate Athletic Solutions. So they want to invest $50 million to $200 million apiece in select group of universities. What they're doing, they're not looking to buy equity in an athletic department. This is how he describes it. He says the idea is to build businesses that help them monetize a school's intellectual property, provide them with advice and capital to do it. Mm-hmm. So he basically helps them grow the bottom line for athletic departments. Right. And of course they have to make money, right? So they get compensated by helping generate those future dollars kind of think about it like a royalty?
Two ideas here, Paul. One, when I did the thing with the Boston Red Sox, good morning to the Red Sox. Let's get it going here. I did the CFO thing. Thank you, Seth, for that. But I look at this and I just think of Coach Murphy at Harvard football retired.
Exactly
he says, Tom, it's become professional sports.
It is, and maybe that's just the way we've always known that's the case, and now it's just kind of being above board here. All I know is Jerry Cardinale and the folks at Redbird, they're serious people. They know they know the sports, they know the economics of sports, and they're smart people. And that's, I guess, this is just a natural way for this business to go.
Do we know, Lisa, does some star at Michigan make a lot of money, and some kid at the University of Illinois doesn't make a lot of money?
Yeah, it's going to be different. Well, what's going to happen is that these kids are going to start, now that the tables kind of turn, the kids turn to coaches and say, well, how much are you going to offer me? Like, it's a different world out there now
They're
for
gonna,
them.
it's a whole new world.
Like Coach Saban at Alabama, he says, I spend years recruiting a kid. I spend years developing him when he gets on campus, and then I lose him because the coach across the street will pay him more money.
Right.
So, but that's, and that was one of the reasons why Coach Saban hung it up, but that's where we are, and that's just the marketplace, I guess.
Next.
All right, Memorial Day weekend getaway.
First leg of the Triple Crown. Memorial Day, July 4th, and Labor Day.
Look at that. See? Okay, it's going to be worse traveling because of a lot of things. Okay, AAA saying 43.8 million people expected to travel at least 50 miles from home between Thursday and Monday alone. Okay, they're saying up to 3 million might pass through airport checkpoints as well. The reason why they say it's actually getting less expensive to travel, so more people are doing it. The government data last week, it showed airfares down, renting cars are down, hotel rates dipped down a little bit. But travel agents said, people are still price conscious. They're doing a few things. They're booking a little farther in advance. They're staying closer to home, so you're going to get that more Jersey Shore traffic. Oh, right. And they're going to take those shorter trips. They're staying in 3-star hotels instead of the 5-star hotels. So those are some of the things they're doing.
We get rain and 71 degrees. That's about normal.
No, it's going to be a phenomenal weekend. It's going to be nice. And between this afternoon and Monday evening, I will not be in my car. If I go anywhere, it'll be on the bike, on the little cruiser, the little beach cruiser bike.
Yes.
I can bike to the restaurants, I can bike to church, I can bike to, bike to the beach. No cars.
No cars.
Worst weekend ever. Oh. Had to pick up an offspring at the Hyannis Ferry.
Oh boy.
It's like, it should be like a 90-minute trip, and I think it was 6 hours. I had to wait an hour to turn left on Route 28 out in Cape. Never again. Next, what do you got?
All right, this Harris poll found out, you heard of quiet quitting, right? But now there's quiet vacationing. It's taking time off without telling your boss.
That's what Sweeney
does.
Yeah.
Okay. This Harris poll found a lot more millennials are doing it. So it started with the work from home, right? You do that whole business and vacation at the same time. Well, now they're starting to use those PTO days instead for vacation days. So a lot of them are saying they're even scheduling like certain emails to go off at certain times so it looks like they're working. So it's a different
See, we have here at Bloomberg this whole out thing where we know where everybody is at all times. So that doesn't work here at Bloomberg, but that's cool. I like that.
Unless you're home. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, right. If you're working
There's
from home, how do you know?
From home. I don't know.
No, I mean, the travel people that we've talked to have said Thursday's the new Friday. I mean, people are escaping on Thursday, or they're stretching to Tuesday. Yeah. And that's, was the flight bloom of a year, 2-3 years ago. I mean, that's it. Are you done?
All right.
Can you
Last
give us one more?
Here's a quickie, okay? Wall Street Journal. Would you go to a fancy restaurant and order at the counter and then have them bring the food to you? Would you wait in line at a counter if you want the fancy meals?
I'm a
It's called counter cuisine.
Counter cuisine?
Yes, it's happening. It's a new trend.
Some of us call this McDonald's. But continue.
No, you go to these fancy restaurants. There's one in it's called Birdie's in Texas. You go to the counter, you order your fancy menu item with the wine, everything, even tip before you sit down. Then you sit down, they bring it out to you in the fancy plates and the fancy glasses.
Can you see Tom Keene doing that? That's
not
happening.
All.
He goes to the Upper East Side eating establishment this evening. He's not doing that.
No, he's not waiting in line to order something. No.
Yeah, I call it McDonald's. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. In honor of the Tories and Labour of England, There's only one song, The Beatles.
I've changed my mind and open up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance. Thank you for being with us on Apple CarPlay, thank you. There's new Apple CarPlay coming out. They got all sorts of new stuff where you can talk to it. The new thing is now you don't have to touch the screen. You can say, "Give me Lisa Mateo," and you'll get Apple CarPlay and
that's the way
all that. The Bloomberg Business app, it's free out on Apple CarPlay, on Android Play as well. Growing every day for us. It's like a desired thing in new cars, and we're building it out on a 3, 4, 5 year timeline. On YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcast, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. There you'll find. Have you done anything today, Lisa?
I'm going in as we.
I'm
logging in as we speak.
I gotta sign up for this thing.
She's planning a horse divorce for Memorial Day weekend.
The Redo Amex?
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. I mean, I just use the Amex, and there we are. We're on live chat on YouTube as well. Thank you out there, an international audience and across this nation as well. Bloomberg Surveillance on this day, the day after Nvidia. Brought to you by Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Let Cohn Resnick's enterprise risk advisors help you build confidence in your supply chain using data analytics. Visit CohnResnick.com. Let me spell that, CohnReznick, CohnResnick.com. Let's get right to it because our guest is like, we got to do some math with Amy Wu Silverman with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Oh, math. Good morning, guys. Well, futures, yes, we are advancing. After an upbeat earnings from Nvidia, we've reinforced that the global AI boom still going strong. The company also announced a 10-for-1 stock split. We have shares of Nvidia up more than 6%. As far as futures, NASDAQ futures up 1%, or 206 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, or 66 points, and S&P futures up just over 0.5%, 36 points. Nvidia's blowout earnings also sending a bunch of hardware stocks rallying, like server makers Super Microcomputer. They're up more than 5%. Dell Technologies up more than 6%. And then you have the chip makers, Broadcom up 2%, Advanced Micro Devices up nearly 3%. From earnings, as far as to interest rates, Federal Reserve minutes, well, they showed officials remained in no rush to make those cuts. And on the economic calendar for today, we have initial jobless claims for last week. That comes out about a half hour from now. And a read on manufacturing and new home sales later. As far as the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.86%, little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.42%, little change. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa Mateo. I'm going to impress you now with my lack of derivatives knowledge. I can look at delta. I can look at moneyness.
Really?
And all that. Let's talk to an adult here.
Yes.
Particularly with all that's going on with Nvidia out to new highs. NASDAQ futures up 208 points. Amy Wu Silverman is expert on trying to explain the dynamics in the nuances of our expectations. Amy Wu Silverman on the Bloomberg, where we own the high ground on this. I bring up NVDA equity OVDV, and I can look at the skew, I can look at the term, I can look at the 3D surface, and I'm really not sure what it says. Can you use your tools to glean a nuance of the expectations of Nvidia?
Sure. Good morning, guys. So look, Nvidia is one that we've been watching with bated breath, obviously. And the super interesting thing was going into earnings last night, the options market was implying about an 8.5% move. So far, we actually haven't beaten that, but the day is young. And the second thing I'd say was we didn't have much right tail, Tom, which is super interesting for Nvidia because that's one where we've seen a lot of right tail chase. That sentiment wasn't there. What I think we really need to watch today is that right tail is game on because of everything we saw during earnings last night.
Does it fold over into the rest of the Magnificent 42 or the NASDAQ 100? I mean, folks, I think we all understand left tail's gloom, right tail's a certain confidence. Does this a new regime of confidence from the Nvidia announcement?
Yeah, look, one thing we've talked about is not just looking at the kind of OG AI names like NVIDIA, but to look at the adjacent names, because in some cases that vol is still less expensive and you still get that right tail chase. So, one thing we've been talking about is don't just look at NVIDIA, look at the other names like ADI or AMD, Microsoft, others that also have AI conferences going on, because a lot of times you'll see that proxy correlated move, Tom, of the right tail spot up, volatility up, not just for NVIDIA, but for that entire space when the enthusiasm starts to bubble.
Tom, Amy Wu Silverman is a graduate of Princeton University, so I'm dying to ask her what her favorite sandwich is at Hoagie Haven, but I'm going to be professional and not go there. Amy, can you just define for this non-derivatives person what right tail and left tail is?
Sure. Okay, I have to say it's the meatball sub. I just have
Nice.
to put it
There
in there
you
because
go.
Princeton reunions are this weekend, so I definitely have Tigers on my mind.
Very good.
But look, right tail is the idea normal distribution of that reach for upside. You know, that's where we see the FOMO and the MOMO. That's where we see the call demand. And the left tail, which unfortunately has been dead for quite a while, is your equity skew. It's that demand for downside protection, which apparently these days nobody seems to want.
Hey, Amy, I'm just looking at Tom forces us on a daily basis to look at the VIX, and it's now below 12, firmly below 12. What does that tell you?
Yeah, I think, we hit sub 12, we're circling 11. You know, I'd say, look, there's two things. One, index volatility has been quite low for some time. There are some artificial reasons why this is happening, and there's just some economic reasons because things look okay, because the breadth of the market still, is very much Mag 7 driven, even if the breadth is doing okay. But look, the rise of 0DTE, the idea that almost 50% of all SPX volume these days is 0-day to expiry trading, look, that does matter, and that is influencing these headline numbers because VIX is just a 30-day weighted average of implied vols across calls and puts.
How do you define exuberance? I mean, financial media people toss around exuberance. We read it from Schiller. We read it from Greenspan. How does Amy Wu Silverman measure exuberance?
I can actually give you the technical definition that we use. It's 25 delta put minus 25 delta call implied vol over at money vol. If that number is inverted, right? If it goes negative, it means that the call implied volatility is outweighing put demand. It's something we actually look at quantitatively on a systematic basis for signals.
Okay, what you just got there, folks, is an insight into the adult world of derivatives. They take the enthusiasm of the call up, they take the enthusiasm of the put down, and then they compare it to the enthusiasm at the point. The center point.
Okay.
Did I do okay there?
I think you did.
Sheldon Natenberg's in Chicago going, Tom, just shut up and let Amy talk. Amy, what when you write your research note for Monday, or frankly to get into June 30, what are you going to say about the signals you see of expectation?
You know, one thing I'm going to be running the numbers on today is how much of that call exuberance, which we just defined there, is going skew inverted again. Because when we get into these cycles of momentum begets momentum, it's very hard to stop that train. That's why it was super interesting to me that we didn't see it coming into Nvidia. The question now is if it will start to inflect, because that stock split, it really gets the retail going. It doesn't seem like it would from a corporate finance 101, but we saw the same thing happen with Tesla because you start to get new periods of participation too.
Amy, for better or worse, this is an election year. Do you see trading patterns in your derivatives market pick up, change, morph a little bit here in an election year? Because boy, depending upon who wins in November, could have an impact on financial markets broadly defined.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you one scenario that investors have started to toss around as an exogenous risk. So it's not the idea of if Trump or Biden wins. It's basically the idea of a contested election. This is something our chief strategist has talked about as well. But the issue is when you get an actual contested election where it is unclear who the winner is come November, then essentially your VIX term structure isn't pricing that, right? It's pricing a hump for elections itself. It's not pricing a 2000 style question mark. And that's where I think we could see a pocket of volatility that isn't baked into the left tail, and that could be concerning to investors.
Amy Wu Silverman, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning. To reset, folks, for those of you just joining us on Apple CarPlay, on YouTube, around the nation, good morning, Bloomberg Radio 1130. The VIX under 12. 11.61, that's an Amy Wu Silverman number. Futures up 38, 5,365 on SPX futures. Wow. NASDAQ with that Nvidia surge up 1.1%.
Tom, right around 19,000 on the NASDAQ there.
Yeah,
nice
we're
round
there.
number watch
I mean,
for those of us who like round numbers.
Yeah, you may get that in the 10 o'clock hour with Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Donald Trump's last remaining rival in the Republican primary is now his latest supporter. Nikki Haley says she will be voting for the former president in November. Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick has more.
Haley had probably the most acrimonious campaign against Donald Trump. They were personally sniping at each other for much of the time. Haley was more willing to be openly critical of Trump than some of the other former candidates who were challenging Trump.
Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick in the nation's capital. At least 9 people are dead and more than 60 others were injured after the collapse of a stage during a campaign rally in the northern Mexican state of Nuevo León. The state's governor said among the dead was a child. A strong gust of wind caused the stage to collapse during the event, attended by a presidential long-shot candidate. 20 people remained in intensive care in Bangkok more than 24 hours after deadly turbulence hit a Singapore Airlines flight and forced the plane into an emergency landing. One man was killed and dozens of other people seriously hurt after the flight from London to Singapore suddenly hit turbulence. Spinal cord injuries and brain trauma are among those hurt. Travel starts in earnest today for the Memorial Day holiday weekend. FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker says they're getting ready for all the holiday flyers.
We're ready for this. We planned for this. We know it's going to be a busy weekend. We're glad to see the traffic come back. Our first job is safety, so at FAA it's 45,000 employees, all hands on deck.
The FAA's Michael Whitaker spoke to ABC. Finally, Toronto has been awarded the WNBA's first franchise outside of the United States, with the expansion team set to begin play in 2026. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo out on YouTube live chat. I see it in your future, Michael Barr.
Yeah.
You know, I can see you
Yes,
live chat.
I can see him
Michael
out there
Barr YouTube
live
page.
chat.
I thought this was a joke. Yeah, I thought it was a joke, and it's not. We're talking the hockey thing, and like AI and what they say about me. Trust me, folks, I was a mediocrity. What an honor to have Chuck Hughes out in live chat today. Really? Chuck Hughes was the goaltender for Harvard when they won everything in the 80s with one William Cleary. Mr. Cleary, I did not know this, will celebrate his 90th birthday in August. Wow. He's still telling people like me, no, you're not going to Harvard. But then Chuck Hughes went on and he taught at Catholic Memorial, which was the hockey combine of Boston, and really went on to a great career trying to get Paul Sweeney's kids into fancy schools. Chuck Hughes and all of Harvard, thank you so much for your interest there on Coach Cleary and others. A shout out, a side shout out, 84 years old, Red Berenson at Michigan. Luke Howard, I mean, he and Luke are tight. It's great, but I'm loving this live chat. I had no idea. Sparta's like, you're going on live chat YouTube. I said, call my agent.
Real time.
And, I said, I'm not doing this. My agent's screaming. Sparta says, shut up and do it. Sparta, thank you. YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures seeing a nice lift as Nvidia clears away for AI stocks to keep powering higher. Nvidia shares right now up about 6%. As far as futures, NASDAQ futures up more than 1% at 18,994. Dow futures up 0.2% at 39,869. And the S&P futures up 0.6% at 5,365. Europe Stoxx 600 pulled higher on a jump by the tech sector. And over to the bond market, the two-year yield 4.86%. That's little changed. The yield on the 10-year 4.41%, and that is little changed as well. A few companies making news. JP Morgan Chase, sources saying it's on the hunt to buy a private credit firm to boost its $3.6 trillion asset management arm. They're up about 0.1% right now. Shares of DuPont, they're up more than 5% after it said it plans to split into 3 publicly traded companies. And finally, yes, Live Nation shares down more than 6%. Sources saying the Justice Department joining with a group of states. It's a lawsuit against Live Nation over Ticketmaster's control of concert ticket sales. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
30 seconds here. Here's a simple solution.
Yep.
I can never get decent tickets.
No.
That's what this comes down to, right?
4.
I mean, a stud like you're in like row 3, you're behind.
Oh yeah, you got to know people, Tom.
You got to know
people.
that. But how do you get Springsteen where you're in the 7th row? I've never been able to do that.
The best Springsteen seats I ever had, Tom, was at Fenway when the stage was set up by the Green Monster, and I was probably 3 or 4 rows in front of the stage. So you turned around and faced the stadium. And it was like you're playing center field at Fenway. It was the greatest seats ever.
That's nice.
Ever. There's a great Tom Petty video of that. Out his. Well, we're going to feature Mike Campbell next week in the music.
Okay.
He's got it with
Very
a major new hit. Just great to see him move on from the really tragic death of Tom Petty.
Terrible.
This is really important. Like for global Wall Street folks, forget about the chit-chat, Nvidia and hockey and all that. The FX market's blowing up. So we're going to squeeze a 3-hour conversation with Mark McCormick of TD Bank. It's a brilliant note here where he reaffirms long dollar. Mark McCormick, here's a fact. Euro yen this morning for a sip of sake hit a 170. What is the tension in Japan that redounds over right now to our listeners and viewers?
Well, I think the challenge in Japan is they are the one place that should be a lot more hawkish than they are. It's very clear from the opinion polls. If you look at the cost of living shock, and if you look at the disapproval rating in the diet based on the correlation of how weak the yen is, there's a clear cost of living shock, which is also being dressed by fiscal policy. So essentially, monetary policy is too loose. The government is using fiscal policy to adjust for the cost of living, terms of trade, commodity-based shock that's been going on for a couple of years. And essentially, you basically have Peter's paying to rob Paul. And I think the big tension is the BOJ isn't really sure what they want to do. I think they need to move in a more hawkish direction to resolve some of these issues.
Will the dollar solve that for them? Will you get a McCormick bull market in the dollar? Like, frame it. On DXY at 104, are you looking for a 105 or are you looking for a 110 there?
We're looking for above 105. I think where we're slightly nuanced is we're looking for kind of weak G10 European low yielders. We're looking for a very strong yen, actually, in fact, throughout the course of the next couple of quarters, largely, again, because we think the BOJ is going to be more aggressive. I think the one thing that gets missed in the yen story is the critical dynamics that comes through the pension funds and the actual capital flow drivers in Japan. A lot of people, if you look at what drives yen on a daily basis, I think over the last year, it's macro hedge funds, it's punting on JGBs, it's punting on the yen itself as a tactical trade. But the structural driver of the yen are capital flows from Japan. So I do think one of the things that the pension funds, the way they rebalance, they're basically long global equities. They're basically short yen. But an interesting component here is they're not going to front run monetary policy. Once monetary policy adjusts, they're going to reset their hedging ratios and their targets. And I think a lot of those will lead to stronger yen flows that will be repatriated back into the country as JGB yields rise and as they bring more capital back home through the course of normalization of monetary policy.
Hey, Mark, is there a viable bear case for the dollar?
There absolutely is, yes. There's, I would say right now in conversations with clients, they're kind of open and entertained to any idea up or down for the dollar. I'd say we recently pivoted to be bullish the dollar. The one thing that's been very tricky for markets is people are looking at the dollar smile, which was then, if U.S. growth is better than the rest of the world, then essentially the dollar rallies and then when the world kind of falls apart, the dollar rallies. And then when we fall to the middle, where the rest of the world kind of converges with the U.S., the dollar weakens. The point that we've been underlying for months is there's now an inflation smile. The inflation smile is one where U.S. inflation on a trend basis is diverging dramatically from G10 currencies. So the market's been going back and forth. It cared about, and everyone right now is focused on the end of U.S. exceptionalism and saying the dollar should weaken because growth is converging with the U.S. Our counterpoint is, unfortunately, what we're seeing now is that U.S. inflation is diverging from the countries that are seeing growth converge with the U.S. So you can't have the dollar weaken just only on growth if U.S. inflation is hotter than every place else. And there's also the big elephant in the room is there's an election this year. So
exactly.
There's an expiration date on when the Fed can and will cut, which we don't have those conditions for any other G10 currency. So I think, sorry.
No, I just want to get in, and I think it's really important for our listeners. Can a new or next President Trump jawbone the dollar weaker? Is there any evidence of that?
I don't think jawboning would work. I would say kind of changing the structure of the Fed. And I think an important piece in the conversation with clients is always first order effect and second order effect. I think the second order effect, if Trump were to win again, could be a weaker dollar, a dramatically weaker dollar. It's been very clear, even from reading Lighthizer work, that they're concentrated on industrial policy, on trade deficits, and potentially even a new Plaza Accord. But the first order effect is that the market is underpricing geopolitical uncertainty. FX vol is underpricing inflation divergence. Historically, again, if you kind of think about what's priced into the markets, they're looking for 2 Fed cuts. If we basically have one inflation error through the summer, September probably goes to 0. And whether or not the market wants to price in December, Trump's macroeconomic policies, the uncertainty of fiscal stimulus plus tariffs creates an environment with above target inflation that you might actually have to price in hikes for 2025, which is not priced in. So just the risks around those things, I think, create conditions where the dollar has to strengthen. But the second order effect could be a weaker dollar, either through policy intervention.
30 seconds. Mark McCormick, Memorial Day weekend. Even Paul Sweeney's not focused. Is that when Japan intervenes again?
Oh, good question.
It could be. I don't think they need to intervene at these levels. Our short-term fair value models, which kind of give us a good gauge of speculation because we're looking at how things deviate from rate differentials and fast market drivers. We should be around 150. We're at 155. I think they basically have changed the market psychology. But for us, we think they're gonna hike in July, and we think they're going to continue to do quantitative tightening and err on that side in June. So I think BOJ policy is adjusting to accommodate the moves that we've seen by the Ministry of Finance, which would push for stronger again. So I think that will be the playbook.
Great update. Mark McCormick, thank you so much. TD Securities there. And I think you said strong dollar. Stronger dollar.
I don't know what. How do you short the dollar?
I don't think our people in America really focused on it. We're also narcissistic in our domestic battles that we're really not focused on dollar dynamics.
Well, Tom, as you get ready to go over to Paris for your next sojourn, I'm looking at the euro, 1.08 on.
I mean, you look at some of the emerging markets. I'm bringing it up right now. I mean, Philippine peso 58.135, a new high 2 days ago. New weakness, I should say, 2 days ago. And I'm sorry, that's game-changing for people in the Philippines, just as one example.
Yeah.
Out there.
Absolutely.
Strong
U.S. dollar.
I don't know what to make of it. We're like, we need more Nvidia. That's what we need, more Nvidia discussion. NASDAQ futures out to a new high.
How about that?
S&P futures up 39, 5,366. I'm about ready to make my first, enter the market.
Yeah, I think you can. Dollar cost average.
Nvidia's too risky. I got to go with something safer. A utility. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures pointing to a higher open. Nvidia has a lot to do with it for the fifth quarter in a row. It's come through with an earnings beat. It had a forecast for future growth and also a 10-for-1 stock split. Its shares up 7%. Let's head to futures. NASDAQ futures up more than 1% at 18,999. We have Dow futures up 0.2% at 39,862. And S&P futures up 0.7% at 5,366. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.87%, little changed. The yield on the 10-year 4.41%, and that is little changed as well. We have gold extending decline, spot gold down lower at $2,366 an ounce, and we have WTI crude $78.17 a barrel. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. This morning, claims come in a little light, fractionally. There's the revision, comes in on target essentially.
Every week.
I'm going to call it a nothing burger.
Yes, I'm with you on that one.
When you cook burgers on Memorial Day, you don't do Beyond Meat. I can't see you doing that.
We cooked some good burgers yesterday. We're good, and we'll be fired up all weekend.
Claims a nothing burger, but we go to new home sales. I mean, you're going to see it with Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele here. New home sales actually, I think, could be interesting here because mortgage rates are coming down.
Coming down, still above 7%, but coming down off the peak. Yep.
Where does it slam in? Where does the frenzy slam in again?
The question I have for a lot of these real estate folks is, what's the mortgage rate where it just gets people to say, all right, I'm ready to sell my house and move to the next one, frees up supply? Is it 6%? Is it 5%?
5.99?
Maybe, yeah. That might be a good one. That might be a good one.
Bloomberg Surveillance, our economic data. And it's a lot of economic indicators. There's just no other way to put it. Into Michigan Senate and housing, S&P Schiller, CoreLogic next week. Our economic indicators with the leadership of Commonwealth. Commonwealth, thank you. Commonwealth supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth. Go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Commonwealth, thank you for helping us with our economic indicators. Hugely anticipated, no other way to put it. Sarah Hunt joins, Chief Market Strategist at Alpine Woods. She's a big believer. You got to be in the market. Sarah Hunt, right now, what's the nuance to your certitude you got to be in the market?
I think the fact that you didn't really see any slowdown on the Nvidia juggernaut, especially as it comes to, we've got a new chip coming. People thought there might be a little bit of backing off of demand. I think right now you've got this incredible story where you have somebody that's so far ahead of everybody else that you are able to get pricing and able to get margins that are actually pretty incredible relative even to the tech space, especially with hardware involved. So I think that you've got a story and the market has latched onto that story and the earnings are coming through, and that is very difficult to stand in front of.
That's the point. The bears want to stand in front of it. If the bears have a short belief, has it been cleared out?
I don't know that it's ever going to get cleared out because there's always going to be somebody who's got a contrary view. And to be fair, I also think that there are plenty of things to worry about. So I can understand that contrary view. But it's very difficult when you have a secular story like we have right now, that there's this growth in technology that everybody is spending money on, and that everybody who's spending money on it, unlike past, what you could call giant spending sprees, all these companies that are spending money have the cash to spend. They're not doing this on credit. This is not something that is vulnerable to both higher rates and or to an economic downturn, because everybody who's investing sees this as something that they absolutely have to be in or that they will be left behind. That is a change. And that is one of those changes that, again, is very hard to both predict, it's hard to stand in front of it, and it's hard to figure out exactly which way it's going to go. It won't go in a straight line, but right now it's been pretty strong.
So, Sarah, talk to us about just the tech sector in general. It seems like for years it's been the leader of this market. Do you still believe the tech sector can lead this market higher?
I don't really see where you're going to get leadership outside of the tech space. There are other places where things are doing well. And as this broadens out, I think that there will be sectors that also do well. But where is the cash and where are the earnings? And right now that's in technology. You've seen things come back. Financials are earning money. There are places where areas that were not doing so well are doing better. But nothing is doing as well right now as technology, and that makes it difficult for something to knock that leadership away.
All right, where else do we go here? I mean, I think, Tom Keene, he's in those big tech names and he's clipping coupons. Where do the rest of us mere mortals go? Maybe try to find some value here in 24.
Well, if you take some of the tech stocks out of the S&P 500 earnings, the average multiple isn't nearly as dire as it looks if you include those larger multiple stocks. So I think that there's room for the market to broaden out. And I think that the economy, it seems to be doing fairly well. You're looking at rate cycles that are about to turn, and whether or not they turn in the U.S. as quickly as people want them to do is a question. But I think that you've got some relatively benign economic backdrop.
Right.
And I think that that gives a lot of other companies room to make money. And you're seeing those earnings come through. It's not just in the tech stocks. You've seen earnings do well in other sectors. It's just a question of, in terms of leadership,
Right.
they seem to be in the forefront.
Sir, is this a time to focus bets, either individual stocks or sectors, or is it a time to be over-diversified? I'm thinking of Sequoia, what they invented, Fidelity 50 years ago in that. Or do I want to go the other way and own a lot of different sectors or individual stocks? Which way on diversification?
I think you have to have some. I don't think that you want to be all in only on tech. Now, if you had been in the last 2 years, you would look back on everything and say, why wasn't I all in on all tech? But when you have those pullbacks like you had in 22, you get a real downdraft. And I think that that's what you're trying to do, is protect yourself in having areas that should not be as vulnerable. And it's clear right now that tech has not been vulnerable to higher rates, where other parts of the economy have been arguably somewhat vulnerable, although not as vulnerable as the Fed expected. So I think that you do want some balance, but I think that ignoring or thinking that tech is going to go away at some point, or that the risk is too high there, is a detriment to your portfolio as well.
Hey, sir, how about in the fixed income space here? I mean, I can go into a 2-year treasury, no risk, and get almost 5% here. Is that a good trade, or should I maybe think about taking some credit risk?
Well, I think that this is another question of where are you in your investment standpoint, right? Is it earlier? Are you younger? Are you older? Are you retired? Are you looking for income? Are you looking for safety? There are a lot of questions that are not as easy to answer. Is this a great trade? I don't think that there's anything wrong with a 2-year treasury here, but you've got reinvestment risk. The spreads are so narrow right now, you're not getting paid a lot to take risk. The treasuries do look attractive on that front. But at the same time, there is a question of where longer term rates are going to go. And if the Fed starts cutting, those short term rates are going to come down. So it could be helpful to go further out on the curve if you can get a reasonable return.
When does healthcare move finally? I mean, we have many, many equity interviews that say an easy, intelligent investment is healthcare. But Sarah Hunt, we're looking for a catalyst. It's out there somewhere, isn't it?
Well, it's out there, and it's been the aging catalyst for the last decade, right? The world is getting older, the U.S. is getting older, and this is going to be helpful for healthcare. The problem is that healthcare is not one thing. Healthcare is many things. And if you look at what happened just recently with all of these GLP drugs that had soared those stocks, right? But the whole group didn't go. And the argument is, if we get people skinnier, are they going to need less healthcare in other areas as they get older? So there's a lot of questions, and healthcare has a lot of moving parts. It's sort of like Europe. Is it Europe's year? Well, there are times when parts of it do very well, and there are times when you want to be involved. I think healthcare will continue to generate cash, which it is, but it's very difficult, and different sectors go in and out of favor very quickly. So it's a tough space, but yes, there's ultimately a lot of people who are going to need a lot of healthcare coming forward.
Sarah Hunt, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning. Just love her work. And like Gina Martin Adams, it's just, it's not this get in, get out baloney. No. It's like, okay, how do you participate? And not in the Charlie Ellis essay.
Yep.
In the FT is just devastating.
Yep.
I mean, he just says, explain to me, if you have any kind of timeline, why you're not in equities.
Yep. I mean, I got all the Sweeney offspring maxing out on their 401ks. If I've done nothing else for them, I've got them in that strategy.
Killing that. There's no question about that. Bloomberg Surveillance, we're brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, June 4 to June 6. Coming up, June 4 to June 6 in Nashville.
Yeah.
Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit Insight, INSITE, insight.bnymellon.com.
I mean, Alex Steele has no idea what I've got planned for her down in Nashville when we go down there. We got Cracker Barrel Restaurant.
The Barrel to Crack.
Yep, we're going to Country Boy Restaurant.
Whoa. Is Cracker Barrel where Lisa you go up and you make your order, and then they bring it to your table.
It's not like McDonald's.
It's not going to
No,
be
you
like
sit
when
down
you
at a
get your
proper table.
wine,
Yes, you sit down at the table, they come to you.
your white asparagus at Cracker
and
Barrel.
they bring you your smothered chicken.
Yeah, baby.
That's it.
I mean, what does Lisa Mateo do with a Cracker Barrel? I mean, she's just like a fish out of water there. There's nothing on the
They
menu.
have salad.
No,
They have
there's
salad?
nothing.
They do have
Okay,
salad.
all right.
Yeah, they serve yogurt. I think Nixon was president as well. The future's up 38 right now. He's never escaped the store on the way out of Cracker Barrel. Michael Barr with our news.
Well, they got that cool peg game, but anyway.
Yes, yeah. You can do that forever.
Oh, my. Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Immigration policy may get a vote in the Senate today. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he'll bring the one House Speaker Mike Johnson refused to bring to the floor.
Will both sides come together to advance a bipartisan border security bill, or will partisanship get in the way once again?
But Republican Tom Tillis says Schumer may have miscalculated the situation.
There were already no votes in his conference. So, I mean, it's just going to demonstrate that there was no path. He knows that it's not going to go anywhere in the House.
In any case, it is scheduled for today. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Former President Trump's last remaining rival in the Republican presidential race is now his latest supporter. Nikki Haley says she will be voting for Trump in November.
I stand by what I said in my suspension speech. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me, and not assume that they're just going to be with him.
Haley says Trump has not been perfect on policies such as the border and the economy, but Biden has been a catastrophe. Millions of people take to the air and roads for the Memorial Day holiday weekend. However, there are questions about whether shortages of air traffic controllers could slow down flights across the country. FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker.
About 65% of cancellations come from weather. Less than 1% come from staffing issues. So we're not anticipating delays from staffing, but the weather is out of our control, and we're just going to try to work to navigate safely through that.
The FAA's Michael Whitaker spoke to ABC. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Biscuits and Gravy. And this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I'll do research. One of our interns is working on the store. Like, what are the items at the store that the Barr family, Mrs. Barr can't get out of there without, whatever. We'll have we got to talk to New Jersey Transit. In Connecticut, I've literally seen, you're going on the Acela, and you see the wires almost touching the ground because they get warm. And this is like trigonometry, folks. What'd they call it? Hyper. I can't remember. I'll look it up. Anyways, the bow gets bigger in the wires. Paul, that's what's going on in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been riding New Jersey Transit every day for 35 years. By and large, 95, I don't know, even more than that, all good, no problem. It gets gajillions of people in and out of the city every day. But it's a system that's like more than 100 years old, so stuff happens, weather and stuff like that. So they apparently, yesterday was a big deal. Some wires down, and right at the peak of the afternoon rush hour, the worst possible time.
We went to the moon. Why can't we fix this? All it is
well,
is
we've
wires.
got the Gateway Project, Tom. After 20 years, we've got the Gateway Project. They're going to kind of put in some new tunnels under the Hudson River, because the tunnels there that we go through every single day are, again, more than 100 years old, and they had a shelf life of 50 years, and apparently. But we're going to get some new stuff out there. So they're building like crazy. They're upgrading, Tom, to answer your question, and it'll all be fine. So just don't worry about it.
That's what this the pricing tolls is supposed to help.
Starting July 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but my New Jersey Transit going up 15% July 1st.
Yes.
You're going up 15%?
Yeah.
That's that's your congestion tax.
Exactly.
Good morning from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after Nvidia earnings show that AI computing spending remains strong. Those shares up about 7%. As far as futures, NASDAQ futures up 1% at 19,018. Dow futures up 0.1% at 39,855. S&P futures up 0.7% at 5,367. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.87%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that is little changed. As far as economic data, initial jobless claims came in lower than expected, 215,000 applications. They were filed last week. And to earnings we go. Yesterday was all about Target. Today we have some more retail earnings. We'll start with VF Corp. You know them, the parent of Vans, Dickies, Timberland. Well, they're down about 7%, reported a fourth quarter loss along with 2 downgrades. BJ's Wholesale, their shares up 0.5%, reported adjusted earnings per share for the first quarter that beat estimates. And finally, Ralph Lauren reported adjusted earnings per share for the fourth quarter. It beat estimates, but here's the thing, it was offset by a soft revenue guidance, so those shares down 3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Again, a lift to the markets. Futures up 39. It's a fractional lift, but nevertheless strength there. Look at the NASDAQ, Paul. 1.3% up, 235 points. It's still bringing it on here as we're less than an hour away from the opening.
Absolutely, Tom. I mean, that's a good look here. I mean, the Netflix numbers, the bar is, I'm sorry, the Nvidia numbers, Tom, the bar is so high for that company, but I guess we've had 5 quarters in a row here where they've more than exceeded expectations here, taking that stock higher.
Wendy Schiller from Brown University joins us right now. Wendy, it's a cottage industry of figuring out how the conservatives ran to the middle to finally get elected. And it basically, back in ancient history, Barry Goldwater down in flames. And then Reagan went out and he tried to redo the same thing, and he lost to Gerald Ford. And I remember that clearly. And then all of a sudden Reagan defeats Carter. And the whole mood was to go out and find the Reagan Democrats. For the president, where are the Biden Republicans?
Well, I mean, the Biden Republicans are people who now call themselves independents because they don't want to be associated with Donald Trump. I mean, so, we had independents before. We always have people who switch their votes. But that number has grown over time, not that much, but maybe 5 to 8%. And that 5 and 8% is really after 2016, where they can't go back and vote for Trump in 2020. So they call themselves independents, but they vote for Republicans for Senate and House and at the state level. So that's the bubble of people who formerly known as Republicans that Biden wants to remind that they rejected Trump a couple of times already, or Trump wannabes in 2022, right. And therefore they should come back to him. And this is such a precarious election in the sense that we don't know what it will actually hinge on in October and November. Right? The economy is generally very good, except for inflation, but very good. And we don't see a lot of indicators that's going to change a lot between now and November, at least with unemployment. Right? So what is going to be the issue, or is there even a single issue? Is it just now multiple issues to different groups of voters?
Can you imagine, Nikki Haley falls on a sword, decides she's going to vote for Trump, but can you imagine, Professor Schiller, that the people that support Nikki Haley will then go over and support President Biden? Can you make that leap?
It all depends on how this summer unfolds with Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump has been relatively restrained, either by court order or because his campaign is doing a good job of that. But you can imagine that certainly at the convention and afterwards, he's going to let loose, because he's already won the nomination again, and he thinks he's going to win. He's up in the polls. He's not going to be controllable. And the question is, how bad does that get? And what kind of vision does that present for the future for anybody who didn't vote for him before? I mean, do you really want him back? So to me, they're still unknown. I think they're going to be the undecideds in the polling in October, November. And it's undecided about whether they're going to vote, not who they're going to vote for. They're not going to vote for Trump. They're not going back to Trump. So that's a tough thing for Biden. But again, things like forgiving more student loans when there are student protests is bad politics. That's just bad politics. But Biden has not seemed to care about that much in the last couple of years. He just does what he thinks is the right thing to do.
So, Wendy, here's a question. It's just a really broad question. Where are the pre-2015? I'm thinking the day before former President Trump came down the escalator at Trump Plaza. Where is that Republican Party today?
I think as a party, that party is gone.
Okay.
That party is erased as a sort of functioning, powerful party. It doesn't dictate policy at the state level anymore in state legislatures. It doesn't control the House of Representatives anymore. There are a few holdouts in the Senate, but you can hear the voices of the most conservative senators emboldened. Rick Scott just announced, senator from Florida, who's running for re-election. He must be quite confident that he's going to win that race, that he's going to put in for Senate Majority Leader against John Cornyn and John Thune, who are not liberal, but they're considered more mainstream establishment Republican. But he's going to run as kind of a Trump guy. And you can see how the Trump wing of the party is taking over all of the mechanisms of government. And when parties cease to control government, they cease to be able to, function and deliver for their constituents. So that wing of the party functionally is dying, if not dead. So that's the big question mark, whether that happens. So that's the thing that Republicans have to ask themselves. If Trump wins again, it's the nail in the coffin for the establishment Republican Party. And that's just a fact. So how loyal are they to that version of the party? And I don't think they even know the answer to that question.
All right. So for former President Trump, it doesn't seem like any of his legal issues, including the case in New York City at the moment, has any real impact on his political standing. It's just shocking to me, but is that kind of where we are?
Well, I mean, even after January 6th, his own party sort of got mad at him for 2 weeks, and then they all went to Mar-a-Lago, and many of them, Kevin McCarthy included, to say, okay, we forgive you. And now they're showing up in New York to say we're standing by you. It's a new age of politics where there doesn't seem to be a limit on what a politician can do without penalty, in the polls at least. But remember, Donald Trump lost the election in 2020, and his surrogates lost the election in 2022. And we're forgetting that history. So, the idea that he's going to win again easily, or his surrogates are going to win again easily, that defies the last couple of years of history in terms of our elections.
Why can't we have an election length like the British? Professor Schiller, there's got to be some thesis at Brown University over how do we take a 3-year extravaganza and dash it down to 6, 7, 8 weeks. How do we do that?
Well, so the reason, I think you probably already know the answer, I think it's rhetorical, is that the development of mass-based political parties, starting with Andrew Jackson, but going all the way, and then have parties controlling government. As government gets bigger, there's more to control, more to give out to your loyal people. So parties become a business and organizations, and primaries are good for the business, because then people stay in the organization. Parties say, oh, you lost control, but they control the primaries. So it builds up the party to have a primary system, and that's why we have such a long campaign.
If Martin Van Buren ran today, would he be a Republican or a Democrat?
Well, it's funny because in those days there were Democrat Republicans, so it's very confusing. But in the meantime, let's look at the signals that we're getting from the state Senate races. In other words, the U.S. Senate races in the swing states. Watch those and watch the poll numbers over the summer and see if those Democrats are holding on. And if they're holding on, there's more hope for Biden.
Wendy Schiller of Brown University, truly one of our definitive textbooks on civics in America. Questions like, Martin Van Buren and what they invented, what they wrought back there. Paul Sweeney and I were considering July 4 in London, the British election.
Absolutely. I don't know why we don't do a remote. I'll make a phone call here.
We're going to,
Rich, let's get on that.
July 5th. We got Jobs Day.
Yep.
And we got the debris from the British election.
Yep.
Lisa won't be here.
No, please. She's taking a long
huge.
July 4th weekend.
We'll be here, though. Seriously, folks. It's going to be a big Jobs Day.
Yes.
I've done that tour of duty before. It's okay. I wear shorts. I wear flip-flops.
Yeah, that's okay. It's summer.
Got my floaties on, Lisa.
Yep.
I can't see you in flip-flops.
You can't see me in the flip.
Out on the Cape, maybe, with a cocktail in his hand?
Oh, true.
With an umbrella.
Okay.
A cocktail at the Cape is called a Narragansett Lager beer.
Yep.
Futures up 38, Dow Futures up 75. In honor of the British election, we're playing British music about the angst that are out there. You gotta play the Stones.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Surveillance on Apple CarPlay, on Android, on YouTube. Good morning across the nation. Good morning around the world. Really want to comment. I mean, off the start, I've been monitoring the heat of selected cities. And this heat thing is tangible. I mean, Miami's having weather like it's July.
Yeah, so
for starters.
Yeah, so everybody flocks down to Miami for the no taxes, the this, the that, the weather. Okay, how you doing now?
Yeah, well,
exactly. That's what I want to know.
I looked at a place.
You're supposed to vacation in Florida.
I'm looking at the Pacific Rim, or some over by Spain and that.
Oh,
and
I know.
I don't want to get into a climate change article, but I'm looking at the numbers on my cell phone, and the answer is 104 is 104.
How about the Philippines? I mean, there's a little bit of humidity there as well, right?
Yeah, they have a heat index thing where they add on with the humidity, so it'll be 104, and the number on the screen says 115.
Yeah.
You're like, really?
No, thanks.
Come on, stay cool, particularly across
Jersey
Memorial
Shore.
Day. A lovely weekend up here in New York for Memorial Day weekend. Paul Sweeney's on top of that.
Yep.
Maybe some rain on Monday. We'll have to see as well. The guest's so important. Now, we're going to get right to this. We are on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Search Bloomberg Podcast. Bonus, Lisa Mateo with a live chat there as well. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, INSITE, June 4 to the 6th, June 6th, June 4 to June 6th, in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit Insight, INSITE.BNYMellon.com. We thank BNY Mellon for, among other things, Jeffrey Yu. We can say that. And thank you, BNY Mellon, as well. Futures up 36 right now with our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We have futures advancing after upbeat earnings from Nvidia. Kind of reinforced the global AI boom is still going strong. Nvidia shares up more than 6% right now. Futures, Nasdaq futures up more than 1%, 19,000. Dow futures up 0.1% at 39,846. S&P futures up 0.6% at 5,364. Nvidia's blowout earnings also setting a bunch of hardware stocks rallying. We'll start with server makers, Super Microcomputer, Dell Technologies up more than 6%. You have chip makers, Broadcom up more than 2%. Advanced Micro Devices up more than 3%. Then we go from earnings to interest rates. Can't forget about that. Federal Reserve minutes that showed officials have higher for longer on their minds. You also have Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon said he doesn't expect the Fed to make any moves until 2024. The bond market, the 2-year yield 4.87%, up a basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.43%, and that is little change. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Again, the basic theme this morning with all the enthusiasm of NVIDIA is a lift here by the half hour. Gene Munster, our interview of the day on NVIDIA, and we'll do that in a bit here. Ed Al-Hussainy with a sigh of relief. Oh, God, Tom, I thought you were going to ask me about NVIDIA. We're NVIDIA free right now, and we can do that with our global rate strategist with Columbia Threadneedle, with legit academic chops and world chops. Ed Al-Hussainy joins us right now. I want to cut right to the chase, which is this massive parlor bet to Jackson Hole that the new 2% is something different. This is a heated debate right now. Is there going to be a new 2% for the American Central Bank?
The short answer is no. I think they're locked into it. It's very much a political issue at this stage, changing the inflation target in the middle of this process where inflation still hasn't come down. We've paid a massive cost from a social and political perspective in the last year. Changing that now doesn't make a lot of sense. If we zoom out, is 2% the right inflation target for this economy? Probably not. It's probably a little bit too low.
So, I'm thinking about inflation here because I know the Fed's thinking about inflation. In January, February, and March, we were like, man, I guess inflation's coming back here. We got a little bit of a reprieve in April. How do you think the Fed is viewing the inflation gain these days?
I I think whatever the aperture was on inflation in the last year, it's got to widen out a little bit. So the most generous interpretation is underlying inflation is roughly been unchanged in the last 6 months or so.
Yep.
The data exaggerated the decline in the last quarter of 23. It exaggerated the increase in the first quarter, and things are kind of tracking between 2.5% and 3% right now, probably a little bit closer to 3%. And that's where we are. And so the question is, look, there's probably a 50 to 100 basis points of inflation matter to squeeze out of the system. Can we get that done in the course of the next 6 months or so?
And does the Fed need to see that we're there before cut rates, or can they cut rates just on the expectation that we'll get there eventually?
I mean, look, let's take them at face value.
Yep.
And they've said quite clearly we don't need to get back to 2% to start this process. We think rates are relatively high. Where's the threshold? What's the underlying metric they're using? Keep shifting. I would say roughly, something like 2.5% on some sort of trim measure makes sense.
You're in a really tough position at Columbia Threadneedle because they do so much globally out of London and Boston and all the rest. Ed Al-Hussainy, how do you respond to well-meaning managers saying, why are everything going up? Why is wheat going up, copper going up, high yields joining the spread nirvana that we're seeing, Nvidia and the rest? Why is everything going up at once?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of risk capital that's being put to work.
There's a wall of money.
There's a wall of money. The underlying story in the U.S. economy remains very robust. And I think people who sat out the rally last year are being sucked into it now. And so that makes a ton of sense to me. And again, we're talking about Nvidia. There's a massive hype cycle now around the AI story. Yep. It's bringing people in. It's a massive part of the equity market. So there's risk capital to be put to work.
So I'm looking at the 10-year U.S. Treasury, 4.42%. Where do you think we end up year end?
I mean, it's an incredibly difficult question. Look, my best guess, where's the center of gravity for longer end U.S. rates based on, you got to make some assumption around the underlying real rate, some assumption about where inflation is going to be, and some assumption for term premium and kind of what do we need to be compensated for fiscal risk. I think overall it comes out to about 3.5, 375 in my mind. Do we get there within the next 6 months? I mean, it's going to be a push. Something's got to come off the rails on the labor market front to really get us there. But I think that is where the center of gravity is for longer end rates.
When you talk to what are you guys there at Columbia Threadneedle, what are your traders doing? What's the trade here in rates here? Am I buying duration? Am I buying the short end? What am I doing here?
I think the fundamental question is the curve remains inverted. So you are getting less all-in yield the further you step out on the curve as you take more duration risk. Is it worth taking that duration risk? The longer the Fed stays on hold, the more attractive that proposition becomes. You don't want to be too early, right? Last year was a good example of that. But you also don't want to be too late. And so the debate that we're having in-house now is, have we built enough confidence to start stepping out of cash, out of the very front end, further out of the belly of the curve, and further out? And the answer is increasingly, yeah, we are. The inflation story is there. The labor market story is starting to get a little bit more interesting.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, what do you think our good friend, Fed Chairman Jay Powell, what do you think he's going to do here over the next couple of meetings?
He's going to sit on his hands.
Sit on his hands. And just wait for the data to kind of come in and say, all right, inflation is in fact moving down, you can cut rates. Is that a more wait and see type thing?
I would reframe it slightly. I think the key piece of confidence that still needs to cement itself is that we don't need additional hikes. And you saw that in the minutes. There's still some folks on the FOMC who are open to that outcome. I think that's a tail outcome. But they need to build enough confidence that we need to foreclose on that and then move forward. Do we get there by September? I think there's a decent chance that the inflation story will open up for them.
Ed Al-Hussainy, thank you so much. Got to run today. Just don't be a stranger. Love to have you in New York when you're able. He's with Columbia at Threadneedle in Boston. with the news in New York City. Here's Michael.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. A former Republican rival is now getting in line behind Donald Trump. Nikki Haley says she will be voting for the former president in November, but she says she still stands by her call on Trump to earn the support of her moderate independent backers. We asked Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick if Haley could be lining up a bid to be Trump's running mate.
I think at this point, after the way the campaign went between them, it would seem surprising. But again, it's a very important challenge for Trump if he wants to win the general election, to try to consolidate support as much as possible among Republicans. And Haley is clearly the top of the list.
Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick in the nation's capital. The Biden administration has a, quote, deep concern about the closure of a key entry port for aid flowing into Gaza. Israeli forces pushed into the southern city of Rafah earlier this month, closing the crossing into Egypt. A day after the UN suspended food distributions in Rafah over security concerns, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there needs to be a way to get aid in safely, and he encouraged Egypt to do what it can.
Because of combat activities near and around the gate, the environment for bringing the assistance in is really challenged.
Secretary Blinken spoke before a House Appropriations Subcommittee panel. The Memorial Day holiday rush gets going officially today. FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker says, though, they're keeping an eye on a bunch of storms that could cause some air travel problems.
We're watching the weather very closely. It's thunderstorm season. We've got storms from Texas all the way up to Maine, so we're going to be working with the airlines to get them through those storms.
The FAA's Michael Whitaker spoke to ABC. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom Paul.
Srinatarajan is one of our best reporters, and he absolutely nails in this breaking news the why, the path, the history. Paul Sweeney, James Gorman, January, gives up the reign at Morgan Stanley and will now step down as chairman of Morgan Stanley at the end of the year.
You know, Tom, I was just reading Shree's reporting here, Tom, and I can't think of a better succession story than what Mr. Gorman has orchestrated here at Morgan Stanley. Again, he identifies successors, picks one, that successor, Ted Pick, doing very well, persuades the other losing candidates who did not get the CEO role to stay. That almost never happens. Think General Electric. And then stays 1 year as chairman, and then steps down at the age of 65.
Right.
I mean, it's just a textbook.
He's at
succession
65,
story.
so in my, he's a young guy.
Yes.
I mean, he's a young buck. The McKinsey guy out of Australia and did yeoman's duty at Merrill Lynch and then went over to save Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. And this is so different than not the tension, but just the path or process of with John Mack.
Yeah.
When Gorman took over and Mr. Mack stayed around for 2 years.
Yeah.
Radically different.
Yeah.
And,
I knew John fairly well from his time at Morgan Stanley when he was my boss there, and a super strong personality. Whereas James Gorman, from everything I've seen, kind of just an understated statesman there.
James Gorman, age 65, to step down as Morgan Stanley chairman here at the end of the year. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are advancing after Nvidia put to rest any worries about a slowdown in AI spending. Nvidia shares down 6%. As far as futures, NASDAQ futures up more than 1% at 18,995. Dow futures up 0.1% at 39,828. And S&P futures up 0.6% at 5,361. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.88%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.43%, and that is little change. Companies making news, you heard it right here. Morgan Stanley Chairman James Gorman going to step down at the end of the year after nearly 2-decade run at the firm. No replacement has been named as of yet. And Warner Brothers Discovery picking up some of the college football playoff games. It's a deal with Walt Disney's ESPN network. Financial terms not disclosed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Nvidia lifting 7.1%, well over $1,000 per share in a 10-to-1 split. Yeah. That's going to be 103/8, I think is where we're standing right now. Widely anticipated. Thank you for your comments out on YouTube. And I've seen on email as well, joining us in his busy day, Gene Munster, right now on NVIDIA. He is with Deepwater Asset Management. Gene, right before the earnings idiocy yesterday afternoon, the pro stepped in, Gene Munster, with I think the absolute smartest insight I've seen. We mentioned it earlier with Mandeep Singh, in that the purchasing transaction people for NVIDIA are not so much going to play hardball, but they're going to say to their customers, don't give me this, you're not going to buy the next revenue stream of older chips, waiting for the new chip. You don't get the new chip unless you buy the old chip. Expand on that, Gene Munster.
Is the Osborne effect, and that, of course, is when you have an existing product that is going to be replaced by a new product. That new product is not yet available, and historically, that causes the existing product sales to dip significantly. We see that companies over the years, they'll blow up ahead of a new product cycle. In the case of NVIDIA, they were really astute in terms of how they have been communicating this to customers over the past 3 months. That was the time 3 months ago when they announced this new Blackwell chip. And they said, exactly like you mentioned, if you guys want the new chip this fall, you got to keep buying our existing Hopper chip. And that, in fact, did happen. It worked.
And I want to point out here, because Gene Munster's far too young, Lisa Mateo's grandfather probably had one. The Osborne effect is not some MBA at Northwestern. The Osborne effect is the Osborne computer that I spent $2,495 on 40, 50 years ago. And Gene Munster knows that's probably $15,000. I'm the only one in the world still alive that actually bought an Osborne computer. Gene Munster, I went over to NVIDIA yesterday, and I mentioned this to Paul Sweeney earlier, that what I sense here radically different is I don't sense ego-driven tech boy in the leadership of NVIDIA, their CFO statement, their accounting clarity, the stock split, the dividend lift, and all that. Are they rapidly trying to be a mature company to join something like the Dow Jones Industrial Average?
Absolutely. I mean, they are a mature company. They're going to do over $100 billion in revenue this year. It's going to be approaching the $3 trillion market cap, one of the top 3 companies. And they're acting like it. They do not act like people who are trying to pump up a theme. The results are backing it up. The guidance is backing it up. They beat a high bar by 6%. They guided up July by 5%. And those guidance, and I think this is a sign of a mature management team, they keep exceeding, over the last 4 quarters, they've been exceeding those expectations. And so that discipline around guidance is yet another example, I think, of how they are being mature about this. And they got good reason to be feeling good about things for two reasons. One is that they've got products that no one else has. And separately is they're still in the early innings of what is going to be the most breathtaking shift in technology that we've seen in the past 100 years.
Gene, you've been so out in front of this. You know, a lot of what I know about this AI business I learned from you, but talk to us about the competitive environment here. I mean, I was going to say where are the competitors here? I mean, can't they come up with a chip that's comparable to compete with these guys?
I remember we're invested in Deepwater. We invest in both private and public companies, and one of our private companies builds chips, and we invest in this company, an AI chip company. It's called Rain in 2018. And when we think about their business, they do not sip CapEx, they gulp CapEx. And when you think about the competitive set here, it is really limited to a small number of companies that can invest tens of billions of dollars a year into building these applications. And so I think that that's one big piece. There are kind of some glimmers of competition, most of those coming from the hyperscalers, like Google and Microsoft are working on their own chips. But for the most part, Paul, they're running the table. And just one more piece on the competitive threat.
Please.
3 years ago, Elon Musk talked about their Dojo chip, their Dojo computer that was going to power autonomy on Tesla. And yesterday during the call, the CFO's lead comments led with both Tesla and xAI, of course, both Elon companies, those embracing the Nvidia chips. And so even the companies that want to compete with them realize that the return on investment for Nvidia is highest.
Gene, we got a really good comment, a respectful comment out on our live chat on YouTube. Ryan, thank you so much. And Ryan says, and it's a great comment, please move on from Nvidia. There is other news. Except, Gene Munster, there isn't. Explain to Ryan and me the Nvidia effect on everything else out there. Not what it means for Microsoft, not what it means for some tech fanboy in some cappuccino place with you out on the West Coast. What does Nvidia mean for Lisa Mateo, Ryan, or Tom Keene?
NVIDIA's current trajectory of the business, the just reported April quarter, means that we are moving more quickly to artificial general intelligence. And when we hit that, the game changes for all companies. Every information worker, every technical worker is going to be impacted by this. And so the reason why we're so hyper-focused on what NVIDIA is doing is that they are really the very tip indicator in terms of the speed and the rate of change that we're going to see around AI, and that's why it matters.
Should they replace, I'm just picking the names, Cisco or Intel in the Dow Jones Industrial Average? Is it now, this is the moment where NVIDIA is like a Dow stock?
It should be. I mean, this is the guard, I think, has changed a year or so ago. And I think the bigger question is, do you think that this will continue? I absolutely believe what we saw last night is an indication that this is going to continue. I still believe we're in the front of a 3 to 5 year bull market powered by AI that's going to end in a spectacular bubble. But the front end of that bull market is going to be quite exciting.
Gene, let us know when the bubble's near. Gene, call back.
Only I was that good.
Please help Lisa with the bubble. Gene Munster out front of the bubble. Thank you so much with Deepwater Asset Management. Paul, it's not 1999.
No.
Because they're making profit.
Yep.
That's the fundamental difference.
You're absolutely right, Tom. I mean, in 1999, it was just concepts. It was maybe revenue. But here you've got real earnings, real free cash flow. And who's buying this stuff? It's the Amazons of the world. It's the Googles of the world. I mean, it's these big tech companies that we all know and love. They are buying these chips, this technology. And as Gene Munster just said, it's, NVIDIA, for a variety of reasons, has found itself right at the tip of the spear.
Ryan informs me out on YouTube that he does not wear the same shoes as Ed Ludlow. He doesn't have the white shoes. He's just like...
Well, Ed's out. He's in San Francisco. He's Silicon Valley. He's gone complete Silicon Valley. Almost.
Yes, he's gone off the deep end.
He's a Welshman. And
Did he really drive his Tesla automatic driving across the Golden State Bridge?
He had a little problem with the lanes getting onto the Golden Gate Bridge and the tolls. But other than that, it's automated driving for Ed. And he gives you live reporting on YouTube. I mean, on X or whatever it is.
I could just see him at the Mark Hopkins up there having a beverage of his choice, watching the sunset. He's all San Francisco. I'm Bloomberg Technology. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. So how will Nvidia's earnings have an impact on the markets a day after it proved that the AI spending boom is far from over? We also had some more economic data out this morning. U.S. jobless claims posted its biggest back-to-back drop since September. First-time claims decreased by 8,000 to 215,000 last week. All right, the markets are open. We're off and running. Let's start with the S&P 500, up about 0.6%. It is, at 5,339. And the Dow down 0.1% at 39,632. The Nasdaq up more than 1% at 16,990. All right, let's head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield 4.88%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year at 4.42%, and that is little change right now. At the open, yes, let's check in with Nvidia. They're up about 7% and just crossed the 1,000 mark. You can see right there. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
I guess thank you. But, Lisa really nailed it. I mean, she got it in that it's a horse race, and the exuberance, I guess, is there. But, Paul, I don't feel it. And you saw the polls in the last 48 hours. The percentage of Americans that aren't enjoying the horse race is shocking.
It is. It's a K-shaped economy that I guess the economists tell us about. If the haves doing great. If you own assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, great. If not, then inflation's a big issue.
We'll have to see how this plays out. I'm going to wait 10 minutes at 9:31 Wall Street time. We'll see where we are in 10 minutes. Nvidia up 8%, 1,015 right now.
Nice.
We'll see how as Lisa correctly states, the horse race goes. We are just thrilled to have Megan Horniman with us. What timing? Chief Investment Officer, Verdens Capital Advisors here.
Baltimore.
On the horse race. Megan, measure the exuberance right now. So much of America doesn't feel like they're in a bull market. They don't feel prosperous. And yet I'm looking at my Bloomberg screen and the horse race, and things are pretty good. What's the level of exuberance?
I think it's pretty high. I mean, this is clearly a momentum-driven rally around AI. And I'm not saying that AI isn't going to be here and isn't going to change the way that we do many things in work and life. But I think when you have a hot new topic or a hot new item, a hot new theme, this can continue for some time, where everybody has that kind of fear of missing out and jumping into this market. So I think the exuberance in this is pretty high right now. I agree. We'll wait and see how Nvidia settles out today. The market just opened, but their earnings continue to do very well. The question I have there is, is there other companies that can enter this area?
Apple down.
Yeah.
I just want to, throw that out there right now.
For what it's worth. Hey, Megan, so, all right, when we think about this market here, we're just kind of getting out of earnings season here. What did you take away from this earnings season? Is it enough to support this market?
I think it's enough in certain areas, but what we haven't seen yet, obviously it was enough in the tech area, but what we haven't seen yet is really the earnings from the retailers, and that's what I'm going to focus on, because that's where we're going to get a much better idea of where's the consumer. Because remember, the consumer makes up the majority of GDP, and we've started to see some cracks in the consumer. We had a weak retail sales report. We're not going to take one report as a trend. We'll continue to watch, but other things like delinquencies rising. Consumers are stretched. Inflation is finally really starting to have an impact on their spending habits. And we'll look to see what these retailers say in their earnings reports.
So
wait, why didn't you tell me to buy Dell?
I know. Sorry about that.
Are you kidding me? Up
10%.
Up 10%.
So again, Megan, certain names like Dell, as Tom just mentioned, he missed out on that trade as well.
Thank you.
Triple leverage, all cash. So we have earnings coming in pretty solidly. Does this market need a Fed rate cut this year?
I don't see it. I don't see why at this point. I also think that inflation is a bit stickier than the Fed is letting up. I think that most people believe. So I don't think necessarily the Fed is at any rush or needs to cut. The employment market hasn't imploded yet. We know that's a lagging indicator, though. We just started getting signs of weakness from the consumer. We still aren't necessarily optimistic about economic growth. We think that there will be a softening this year quite a bit. But we haven't really seen some of these things that, from a restrictive Fed policy, really start to filter into the economy. The other thing is, if you look at the financial conditions index, this is still showing that financial conditions are pretty easy.
Yes.
So why does the Fed need to cut rates?
Thank you
I don't
so
see
much.
it.
We haven't brought this up in days. Megan Horniman leading here with some real insight. The bottom line is the Bloomberg Financial Conditions Index, Megan, at 1.10. I'm not going to go into the details now, but you're right. We're accommodative. We're not like overly restrictive.
Right. So why does the Fed need to do anything? Because if they do this too soon, they're going to reignite inflation. And we saw this in the 70s and 80s. And where I take a lot of concern is that the Fed's job is they have a dual mandate, employment and inflation. We all know that. But they also have a job to be transparent and not surprise markets. And I really can't say that the Fed hasn't surprised markets or been fully transparent.
Right.
You have a statement that comes out after their meeting that is considered dovish. Then you have the meeting minutes that come out yesterday that are hawkish. So there is so much uncertainty around where the Fed's going to go.
Megan, on breaking news, we got to go. This has been valuable. Can we get Megan on soon again, Rich? Like, I'm thinking November, February of next year. Megan Horniman, I'm kidding. Megan Horniman, we've got to get you on again. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. I think Paul Sweeney's got some really hands-on perspective on this. And the real issue, Paul, is succession on Wall Street. It's not like a, TV show. It's just ugly. It just doesn't work.
It can be. It can certainly be. It can be even off Wall Street. You think about the Walt Disney Company having some problems with their succession there. But Sri Nanarajan joins us here. He covers all this Wall Street stuff for us. Sri, I know you're out with some reporting today on Mr. Gorman stepping out as Morgan Stanley chairman. Is this, again, another just step in what seems to be a very orderly succession at one of the leading investment banks?
What do you expect from a former McKinsey consultant, which is James Gorman's pedigree? He's been very methodical. He's been very public about how he will be giving up his duties. Starting May 2023, when he said he will have a CEO in place later that year, they picked, no pun, but they picked Ted Pick for the CEO role. In January, Ted Pick rose to the title of CEO. And James Gorman said he wanted to help with the transition, help with the succession, and stick around as chairman for a while. He just decided he didn't need to stick around for 2 years like John Mack did.
First usual question here. Is there any health issues or anything like that? There's none of that in your reporting, right?
It doesn't appear so. Look, in fact, Gorman had even signaled a little while earlier that he was likely to step down by year end, and he's just following through and being more explicit about it.
I'm going to pick on Jimmy Keene and Bear Stearns, and it could be 47 other people. This guy's from a really treasured Australian family. I believe his sister's a Supreme Court justice or something like this. Is the difference here is that Gorman actually has a life and can go do something else besides the grind at Morgan Stanley? Is that what's unique here?
He certainly would like to think so. I think he certainly wants to pursue other passions. That doesn't mean that there's some other big job in finance lined up. In fact, I don't think so. He has been a part of this grind for, ever since he graduated from Columbia University after moving to the United States, McKinsey, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley. But unlike some other leaders in U.S. banking that we may have seen, Gorman had been very specific about the idea that he did not want to be a Gus Levy. He did not want to die at the desk. He had a good run. He had 14 years. He transformed the place. But he also said, I know when the time is right and I shouldn't hang on too long.
Yeah, I think one of the the greatest top 2 or 3 things a CEO can do is to plan a successful succession. And he certainly has here. Ted Pick. How's he doing as CEO?
Look, he has a big challenge ahead of him. James Gorman bought low, sold high. The firm was at the brink of failure. They had to fend off the scars of the financial crisis. Not only did he resuscitate the investment bank, he also turned it into a money management juggernaut that now oversees $7 trillion. That has helped reestablish Morgan Stanley among the elite of U.S. banking, back alongside the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgans of the world. For Ted Pick, yes, the strategy remains the same, and he's talking about execution, but investors always are looking for what's the next act? What trick do you pull out now? Because what is the next leg up? In fact, so far this year, in the 5 months that Chet Pick has been CEO. The stock's only up 8%, by far the weakest performer among the big U.S. stocks.
That's where I wanted
Bank
to
stocks.
digress to is John Farrow's wonderful interview with David Solomon in Paris. And, John emailed me and says, what do you think? And I hadn't seen the stock performance, but as Morgan Stanley goes through these changes, is Solomon the executive of the year in May? It's a little early, but I mean, come on. Goldman Sachs is a moonshot, up 55%.
It has done quite well. You could argue that they had a bit of a 2-year detour. In fact, they should have been on this path a little bit earlier. But undoubtedly, as we talk about green shoots in investment banking, M&A markets coming back, capital markets, their strength in trading, Goldman Sachs is well positioned. For the last few years, the narrative had been that Morgan Stanley had pulled away from Goldman Sachs, had become a much bigger bank in terms of market cap at least. I looked at the numbers a couple of days back, and it'll be interesting to see what it is today. But a couple of days back, the gap was only $7 billion, and it is tightening. So TechPick certainly doesn't want to cede that crown back to his arch rival.
Did Solomon get lucky? Different categories did better. Or do you call this a managed excellence by Mr. Solomon?
I mean, calling it lucky would be harsh. I would argue that they've been taking a lot of good steps since 2018. They did have some very obvious flubs that we've talked about ad nauseum. That detour, that move into consumer banking that clearly was not executed. You take that out, and Goldman Sachs could have been where it is today a year ago, 2 years ago. But they're back on track. Everything's good, and that's why there's a glow and a halo on Mr. Solomon today.
Yeah, because you think about it, just a year ago, you were.
I'm trying to think of David Solomon with a halo.
Halo.
I can't get there.
Exactly.
I can say Sri with a halo, but I can't get there with David Solomon.
It's interesting. I mean, we've got Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and J.P. Morgan. They seem to be super, and I'm not sure where Bank of America fits in that, but I'll put them there. I mean, if we're going to get a turnaround in capital markets, which I'm hearing green shoots, what we hear from the executives that you cover, Sri. Is that the expectation that 24 into 2025 could be a pretty solid year or time period in terms of capital markets activity?
Especially if you're Wall Street focused, especially if you're money management, capital markets, deal making focus, and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley certainly fit there. JP Morgan has an enormous investment bank, and it'll obviously benefit. But the thing that JP Morgan will also have to counterbalance is its big consumer operation. They've been riding the net interest income wave for a while. That will ebb at some point. It'll be interesting to see how shareholders factor that in.
What's the body count look like for the summer? We're into summer. We're not into like bonus season, but let's assume Labor Day job discussions on Wall Street are going to happen earlier this year. What's the enthusiasm for employment?
A lot of these firms took some severe steps, at least severe in sort of the relative sense in terms of what they're used to. We talk about their annual quote-unquote culling process, but they went a little bit ahead. All of the big firms carried out that exercise. I think now a lot of them feel that they're adequately positioned to capitalize on the rebound in markets. If we're talking about job cuts heading into year-end again, that would be bad news on the broader economic front.
All right,
Sri Natarajan.
Great stuff.
Thank you so much on short notice.
We can just pull this guy out from his desk, bring him into the studio. Boom, we
could hire him on the team. He could be our meteorologist.
Yeah, he could do that. He could do weather on the threes.
There's some hail falling in New York City right now.
I mean, it looks like, what is it, total eclipse of the sun out?
How's that for an audition?
Exactly.
That was very good. Sri Natarajan with your hail report from New York City. Look for that out on Bloomberg. I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, particularly the perspective on Mr. Gorman and John Mack from 14 years ago. Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, June 4th to June 6th at Nashville. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit insight.bnymellon.com. Running green on the screen, little bit of pullback off the effervescence here of 2-3 hours ago. NASDAQ up 0.8%. The VIX under 12. Well, it's come back. 11.97. I stand corrected. I like what I said. I mean, it's my mistake for the year. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Markets getting a bit of a boost from tech after a blowout earnings report from Nvidia. Right now, Nvidia shares up more than 9%, and it also topped the historic $1,000 mark. Now, that's pushing up shares of other companies like Super Microcomputer and Dell. We have Super Microcomputer up more than 9%, Dell up more than 8%. Then you have the chip makers, Broadcom. They're up about nearly 2% right now. Advanced Micro Devices up 4%. Over to the stock, let's break it down for you. So we have the NASDAQ up 0.7% at 16,933. The Dow down 0.3% at 39,524. And the S&P 500 up 0.3% at 5,324. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. What's great about Alicia Levine is she uses adverbs.
Really?
Because she learned to write. We're going to digress here before we get to our optimistic call here on the markets. Joining us right now, Alicia Levine with BNY Mellon. She'll be at Insight. Are you going to be at Insight in Nashville? We've been talking about it.
I'm not going to be there.
You're not going to be. Paul Sweeney's going to be there.
I'm not going to be there. Well, you're going to have a great time.
Yes,
I was there last year. It was fabulous.
You could go to the Pancake Pantry with Paul Sweeney. Get pancakes and that. Before we get to this, we're talking NVIDIA, AI, EIO, and all this. And you and I were talking about kids. Our kids don't write like we do because they have all these toys.
Well, they've learned there are no consequences for bad writing. Let's put it that way.
Lisa Mateo's
we had consequences.
We
had consequences for bad writing, and they have not. And the interesting thing is, so we are implementing AI projects at BNY Mellon, and the interesting thing is I asked our head engineer who's in charge of AI projects, what should my kids be majoring in?
Yeah.
What should they be? And he said something really interesting. He said English, philosophy, and they need some math. Like they need some elevated math, but it doesn't have to be a major in applied math. And it doesn't have to be, software engineer. And he thought the more, the things that our cohorts and our parents majored in, philosophy, was actually going to be more helpful in how to build out AI and use it in a way that.
This is like Katherine Greifeld, Katie Greifeld, Haverford 101. Get a solid degree. Should we talk about the markets?
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
All right, Alicia, I'm coming off these October lows. This market's had a nice run on the equity side here. Have we had earnings follow suit, or are we getting a little over our skis in terms of maybe valuation here in the markets? I'm not sure.
So as you know, we've been very positive on the market now for about, I'd say, 15 months. And we've said long and strong precisely because there really is very little evidence of a fundamental slowdown in the U.S. Yes, there are pockets of pain. We know where they are. But ultimately, in the aggregate, the data are better. We just had ISM manufacturing data actually come out while we were speaking, and it came in slightly higher than expected, over 50. So the manufacturing base is on an upswing, and we know the awesome amount of tech spending coming from Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta. That's all revenue into the chip sector.
Yep.
So the earnings are awesome.
Yeah.
To use a word our kids would use. So I'd say this: look, the market is not cheap, and rates at 4.5% to 5% may challenge the multiple, and I suspect we have some periods of indigestion because the data is the data.
We call that a correction. When was the last time we had a correction?
The last time we had a correction was October of last year. What we had in April was 5.5%, so it was indigestion, not correction. The average drawdown in the last, since World War II is 12% annually. That's the average drawdown. We haven't seen that in a long time. Are investors getting lulled and like forgot about it? Maybe.
Tell me about use of cash. What I noticed today, and I really looked at NVIDIA's financials yesterday on their website, and they're running it as a more mature company. But the thing that's stark here is these companies don't have bonds. They don't have bills, notes, debt, or anything. How should our listeners frame companies that have no desire to take on debt?
So that's why they're both defense and offense and safe in a world where the Fed may not cut. Right? There's no hiking.
28 multiple, they're safe.
Correct, because they don't have to borrow to grow and are therefore insulated from high for longer interest rates, and in the end they're getting over 5% on their cash. So, and they have these moats around their businesses. So I think that's why, when rates moved higher after 2022, of course, the tech sector was the worst performing sector because of the long duration aspect and the multiples coming down because of higher rates. But in the end, it turned out to be a safety trade because they win no matter what, right? They win in a world of high rates. They win in a world of low rates. And their businesses are protected by size and by content. And so they're also in the center of where the innovation is. This is an innovation cycle, right? And that's what's leading the market.
We started this year with the market pricing in maybe 5 or 6, 7 rate cuts, and now we are maybe 1 or 2 rate cuts. During that time when the expectations for rate cuts came down, stock market's up 11%.
Correct.
How did that happen?
Well, that's really interesting because you had so much volatility in the bond market. I mean, clearly bonds had a hard time with that in the first part of the year because of that. But the equity market, because it's 30% of the S&P is 10 stocks. And it's the 10 stocks precisely that don't have to borrow. And so that's what helped the market. But I'll say this, year to date, there's a better... there's a broadening out in the market in the way we really didn't see last year. Last year really was about the Magnificent Seven. This year it's a broadening. Even utilities are alive and well because of this.
It's an AI trade.
It's an AI trade.
Is there a satellite coming over Manhattan, Paul? It's so dark outside. I feel like I'm in Dune 2.
Yeah, exactly.
I swear Alicia's eyes are blue. Alicia Levine, one final question here. All the market timing and all that, there's this thundering silence from the bears, the shorts. I get it. You've had the courage to say, like Gina Martin Adams and others, you got to be in the market. Here's the nuances if you got to be in the market. What do the market timers do now? What signal do they wait for to go, okay, I got to get into the market?
So we do not time the market, and we tell our clients all the time because you can see it. Just you have a trend like this where the market's up 30%, and if you're waiting for your correction, you never got it. I think this is one of those cases where you dollar cost average in. What would the people sitting on too much cash, contrary to what we've talked about for the last 12 months, get out of cash? If you're still sitting there, ultimately they're going to look for a hotter inflation print, which is going to spike rates, maybe bring the market down another 5 to 10%, and that's. But I think it's only inflation that can do that right now.
You got the level of hate mail you have over your liberal arts statement. Eric emails in, "We don't write no good, apparently." Thank you for that note, Eric. Easy to get a job. We spend consequences for bad writing. Why would you write when 95% of your lives is in front of a screen?
Still communicate, don't you?
We do have to communicate. We do have to communicate. And I think in the end, if one of the smartest people in our bank is telling us philosophy, I think that's pretty important.
Alicia Levine, thank you so much with BNY Mellon. We're going to tie it right in. Paul Sweeney with BNY Mellon in Nashville, June 4th and June 5th. It's a really verbal, aggressive conference. It's not like a bunch of plumbers sitting around going, how about that 3/4-inch washer?
No, these folks down there at BNY Mellon, they're serious, and they're talking to their clients all the time. What I was interested in the last time is how much of the BNY Mellon and the Insight and all these RIAs, their clients want to be in alternative investments, Tom. It's not just 60-40. They want to be in other stuff.
Is Nvidia an alternative investment?
What it is. I don't know.
We'll have to see. What a great day. Thank you so much to our team for quick action, particularly with Sri Natarajan there on Mr. Gorman at Morgan Stanley stepping aside. There's a big argument now, July 4th. Paul Sweeney and myself in London. I think there's going to be an election. We need team coverage.
Yeah, we'll get there. I'll make a phone call.
We've been doing British political songs today. We did Help by the Beatles. We did some Rolling Stone as well. How about this? This was a hugely controversial song for the Beatles. There's 4 editions of it. Lennon and McCartney fighting. They got it done. Revolution.
Well, you better free your mind instead. But if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't gonna make it with anyone else.